mutes. You're good.
Well, hey David, good to see you.
Hey, good seeing you guys.
Well, welcome everybody to the November 20th regular board work session. I'll go ahead and call us to order. For roll call, we have, correct me, all board members in attendance except for the Regalman. And I don't think she's not an attendee, correct? Oh, I'm sorry, Sarah.
Make sure.
Better question asked earlier. Yeah, okay. So we have 6 of us here in attendance, so well above a quorum. We do have a pretty thorough meeting agenda, so look forward to being with you for a little while tonight. I would entertain a motion.
Move to approve the meeting agenda as presented.
A second.
All right, it's been moved by Sean, second by Heather to approve the meeting agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Didn't hear anybody opposed. All right, first up is we've got a couple of lengthy information items. Well, in-depth information items. And so the first one is a long-range facilities plan update, and that's got Sarah's name on it. I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Welcome and thank you to everyone for being here with us. We're going to be presenting our long-range facilities planning work that's been going on since last year. And very, very fortunate and thankful to have our Soderstrom architect with us, who have been helping us through this entire project, Marlene Gillis, and this is Nathan Baker Willis. And then you know Terry Taylor, our director of facilities. We were leading up this whole entire endeavor, which is something that's a requirement from the state every 10 years. We file a report with the state that kind of goes over a bunch of information that's a broad view of how our district facilities doing, where areas of need, and there's several parts to it, but many times the long range facilities plan is done in connection with and plan to go for a bond. And that is not currently what we are doing, but we are fulfilling that requirement to the state, and also probably best to have a 10-year check and not wait until you want to go for a bond anyway. So it's been a great process, and I think that we're really fortunate to have a lot of members of the community join us and weigh in and give us their thoughts, even thinking into the future of what schools might need to look like or might need to accommodate in 10 years. So it's been a really amazing process. So start off with that gratitude.
I'd like to say something quick, Sarah, saying that this took a little bit different step than the project we had in 2015 when we had the long range plan to lead to the bond. Even the long range plans we'd had prior to that, really the bond changed the way our district makeup was. So when we looked at it this time, we got in depth on some things we didn't have before, and the educational pieces that we really went after in the bond in 2016. That equity across the district really showed in this. And so when we got into this, it got into some little bit nitty gritty stuff, where before they were really blanket full of things. So when we get in here, there are some findings, and there wasn't involved with this. The state is helping us with the facility assessments. And so that has never happened before. So some of this material will be coming from that as well.
Thank you. That's great. So for tonight, we're just going to do a process review, like how we've come to this place to have the finished product. Talk a little bit about our demographics and capacity within our current buildings. We will have our facilities condition index, and basically just talking about the shape that our buildings are in many different capacities, different parts that you would want to look at, structural, seismic, a bunch of different areas. The proposed cost estimates, like if we somehow had money fall from the sky and we wanted to fix everything, what would that cost? But also kind of portioned out in different ways for you to kind of see the budgetary pieces of that. And then we will have time for your questions after some general recommendations that came from the committee. So that's what's on deck. Sarah, this has been a little bit fussy with me, but I'm just gonna keep trying. Sticks.
You wanna do it?
Yeah, Terry just tried to clap that. Oh, yeah, got it. Let's start with
I'll
our
supervise.
process review. You're gonna be my clicker, Tracy. This is just our timeline that we've been working off of, and you can see here that preparation kind of started in January to March. When were our facility assessments? That was in the fall.
Just prior to that.
Yeah, I was in the fall just prior to that. So then we started working on reaching out to the community, reaching out to our staff, to our students to see who might want to join us on this. And our first meeting was there in mid-April. We had three meetings, two of them at the end of last year, and then one in September, October, looking at different aspects of the plan. We were looking into kind of looking out to the future's your hopes and aspirations. We looked at thinking about educational visioning, what my education need. And that was great. A lot of like dreaming and thinking together. And then the actual facility condition, like where are we at with our buildings? And then since then, we've just been drafting up and making our presentation so that we can submit to ODE. As you know, but also for the public, this is something for review with our board and definitely to ask questions and take feedback, but it does not require a vote. So just so people are aware of that. This is just that overview of when we were meeting and our committee members. We had principals that were here. We had teachers and staff, custodial staff, EAs. We had some students. We didn't have some of the same things this year. Some of them were seniors, but they were wonderful to have their voices. Many parents and community members and public partners, our partners around in the community that also support us with many different endeavors. We're all a part of that work.
And Chris.
And yes, and board members too. So demographics and capacity, this is not going to be new information. It's presented in a way that's really easy to kind of follow and have an understanding of what we've described several times now as declining enrollment. So this is including our charter schools. I want to say that right up front. But if you look at that current enrollment, that's actually in, this study was done in 24-25. So we're one year past now. But that was that current and actual enrollment up to that point. And then from that point forward was our projected enrollment. And kind of the recommended means, you know, they'll do a projection for us that's high, that's low. And then they have some that are right kind of in the middle, and they'll have a recommended one for us to go with that they think is probably closest. One thing that will come up again later tonight is that our projected enrollment for this year, we were very, very close to almost exact to what it was, which was great for budget planning. So we're very pleased with that because it helps us to make really smart decisions. However, over time here, you can see a steady decline over the next 10 years. And it shows that overall reduction in the small kind of inset table there, a loss over that 10 years overall of 12%.
I do have a question around the enrollment.
Mhm.
Since the charter schools are part of it, we do have a virtual school, and generally virtual schools are going to be and are rising in enrollment. Do we have a cap on MIWA that we can lift or? No.
I think currently there is a cap and that has been discussed in previous board meetings, as I remember.
There is not there, for virtual charters that are not sponsored by us, that's
Yeah.
a 3% cap.
Well, I'm saying that MIWA,
Oh,
Yeah,
just
just
me.
me, well, I don't think there's there might be, let me look real quick. I'll
because
try
that
to
could
find
be
it.
a positive where we may be losing students to district, but realize some students and some of their funding through our virtual school here.
I'll try to get an answer for you real quick, Sean.
And it is really important too, to think of all of that kind of wrapped in, because generally when we're looking at these types of reports, we look at our buildings, and that's something that exists outside of that. So that's a great point. The next slide here is just showing that same information in a different way, broken down by year in our numbers to show that grand total change. And you can see last year around 11,300, dropping down to just shy of 10,000, 10 years from that point. It also shows the grade levels and the change by each of those, what the declines are at each level. Keeping in mind that a lot of this has to do with low birth rate across the state, across the country, is one of the biggest impacts to this, as well as a number of other factors, housing costs and a whole bunch of other pieces that were included in that study.
Can I ask, did this study incorporate development expectations within the city? Okay.
Yeah, well, this is, it was a pretty significant study that we looked at last year. So the next graph is actually really nifty once you explained it to me. So I'm gonna do that for all of you too. So the purple bar is actually our current enrollment per school. So let's take East Gresham as an example. Right now showing 573 kids, and then the bar is rising up to the capacity within the building. So another way to think of that is it's near 80% capacity. The blue bar is 10 years from now, the projected enrollment and where we would be at capacity wise in 10 years. So obviously as enrollment drops, we have more capacity within the building. One interesting thing about capacity, it's kind of a tricky thing because this is the way I think of it. Fire code, like you could fit a lot of people in a space, but to adequately teach them, would you do that? No. Would we take our gym and put up a bunch of partitions and put classrooms in it? I mean, I guess in a dire emergency, but we want a balanced program that serves the needs of kids. So there are spaces that we likely would never use as a classic classroom. So sometimes those numbers are a little bit interesting to work with because not every space within a building was intended when it was built to be a classroom. And so you can't exactly count every single space as part of that number. So we worked really hard on thinking about what are our ratios, what would be the correct percentage there for each of them. And we feel like this really more accurately represents where we are at the current time in terms of capacity.
So with that, maybe this is a Terry question. Looks like our two big high schools are about 90%. Would 90% be probably what we consider 100% capacities for these schools, factoring in the gyms and all of that, or?
When we built them out with the same capacity, similar study. We did overbuild just a little bit with the number of classrooms we provided in that was into that ratio. So it's mirroring that so that we're close to that capacity. We built them at 1,600 as far as what we were trying to cap them out at, and we're less than that right now, and that's where it kind of represented.
Sure, can I interrupt real quick? I just got a text from our principal. Apparently they can't see the graphs online.
Oh,
But they,
Or what they could see.
oh, I just. And now I'm just messing it up.
Yeah, we can just see the front page right now.
It says sharing.
right, so anybody's gonna fix it? How about now?
Can you see that now, David?
Yeah, I can see it now. It's fine.
About if I change it, can you see that new slide?
The new slide has the children on it, says facilities
Yes.
assessment. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Thank you. That's fun. So now I'm gonna actually turn it over to Megan and Marlene to talk a bit about the actual facilities assessment work that was done.
Sean, did your question about the high schools get answered?
Well, I just was wondering, like, okay, I guess I was using the high schools as an example of what percentage of a building would be considered full capacity. So obviously 100%, we don't want kids creating classrooms and gyms and stuff like that. So it's 90% kind of that.
It
Close
is
to
a
full
sweet
capacity.
spot where you don't wanna go over that, because then you don't have your core class capacity.
So at this point, it's basically our two bigs and Highland. That is kind of at that core capacity, but then everybody else is below to significantly below if you're looking at Hall.
And if we historically seen Highland, that's been our greatest challenge over the last 10 years maybe. Trying with just, we've had to create majors in there. And with the son and partners and things, trying to get the program, it's just, there's just more kids there,
And it's a
Is that
school
the
that had a
Alarm related?
portable.
yeah.
No, but it is a school that has a portable in the back that now we're trying not to use. We're trying to keep things inside. There's a little bit of that going on there as
We
well.
did remove that portable, but it's still there for some of that.
Thanks.
Okay, so turning it over to Megan and Marlene to talk about our facilities assessment work.
Sure, so, we toured all of the facilities in fall of 2024. And we combined that, you know, getting our eyes on it, on each facility, we combined that with Terry's wonderful depth of knowledge and also the Bureau Veritas reports that we had. And, put all that together and came up with our facility assessment report. And part of that is our facilities condition index. And what this is you see all these percentages, those are the ratio of the repair costs for each facility. So everything that we saw that we think needs to be repaired to bring the facility to like new condition. And then that's divided by the replacement cost for that facility. So an elementary school of that approximate square footage in Gresham, Oregon would cost X amount to replace. So that's where we get these percentages. And what it does is kind of, it gives us a barometer of the general condition of the building. You can see there are kind of 4 levels to that, from good to critical. Anything over 30% is considered in that critical category. And that's where we want to start to, that's where we might consider thinking about replacement as a more effective option than repair. And you kind of, you might be putting lipstick on a pig kind of at that point. So we have that red dash line, anything outside of that is above 30%. So we see the West Gresham campus, Damascus campus, East Orient Elementary School, and West Orient Middle School all fall above that 30% threshold to some extent. And then we have quite a few schools in that kind of middle range from in that yellow and orange. And then we have, no surprise, our two of our newest schools in that green good. Now, the important thing to keep in mind with this is this only is the physical condition of the building. So it is the things that we can see and touch and feel. It does not take into account things like, does it have a music classroom? Does it have enough gym space? Does it have a large enough library? Does it have a large enough cafeteria and common space? So if we go to our next slide, these are our building grades. So this is something that we, with our educational planning expertise, put together, and we consider the condition of the building itself, but we also consider the structural condition, accessibility issues, educational adequacy. Do we, have large enough classrooms? Do they have daylighting? Things like that. And any hazardous materials that may be in the buildings. So we put that all together and we come up with this summary, which in each of these categories, we give each school a ranking, and then we combine that to get this summary. And generally, you can see it kind of is the inverse of the facility condition index that we just looked at. Not always, because there are some buildings where they may be in, just great condition physically, but maybe they don't function well for what they're doing. But generally here we see North Gresham and East Gresham elementary schools, the top of our list scoring near 100. So think of these as grades. So the bigger the number, the better in this case. And then East Orient and West Orient are scoring the lowest. in this grading.
So. I know we're not going for a bond for lots of different reasons, but at least what the community perception was during the bond. Is the Gresham side would get the last bond and Barlow side would get the next bond, thinking that it would be coming up soon. What's going to be done? Cause I mean, my kiddo went to East Orient, is an eighth grader in West Orient, and I could tell you those buildings are pretty poor. I mean, West Orient's been around since 1924. And yet there's no bond on the horizon. So, you know,
So
the community was told one thing and there's no follow-up for that one thing that they were told. So what are we doing?
So in the recommendations in 2015, there was a limit that the board would like to stay at, and there was a list of $600 million of need that came out of it. And so with that, 299 million came out. The next step, if we'd have taken that next piece, was another $45 million to put a middle school, build a new West Orient Middle School, and move the elementary to the middle school and fix that. That was turned down by that community. It was that Orient community did not want to see that. We didn't really have a good place to put a middle school, so it was really closer to Russell's. And it just didn't feel right for that community. And the bond heard the Gresham was very heavy in the 2013 bond plan. It was a 100 million or 80 million, and then Barlow was gonna get 20 million. No, and so the way it worked out this time, it was 104 and 86 million. So relatively close, but that next piece was what we knew that West Orient, Damascus were not gonna be used. But the next two schools were East and West Orient, and they were going to be there if we could have afforded it. Now it's there, so, and we also know that there's a 20-year note from 2016 that is there. And I think it leveled out. I don't know all the fines of this, Pete probably could help, but on that, it's going to have a shelf life in 36. And I don't know what that from here in the Barlow community and what that planning was, but I know that was the next piece that just didn't make it to that cut of that 299. So I don't know if that helps, but that was what the rationale happened from 2015 bond plan and what was taken forward. So it was on the next step.
Could I ask a question about the previous slide? Just what differences would there have been at East Gresham and North Gresham? Okay. That would have caused almost, yeah, that's.
There were. I recall there were just a couple of more things, sort of almost idiosyncratic things at East Gresham that needed fixed, I think.
There was a lot that came out of, and I'll speak for Bureau Veritas a little bit. Department of Ed did the facilities assessment, and they're gonna do a 15-year plan. Every 5 years, they're gonna go and inventory the schools. They had various numbers of inspectors that came through the building. They had an ADA side and then they had a facility side. I'll be honest that the report that came in for East Gresham was about 5 pages of simple stuff on the building, but there were 40 pages of ADA issues. About a slope was a little bit different. A slope in the asphalt was a little different. I mean, it was very small, but it was the one the ADA folks found. But accessibility of the city and code we met, but it still made the report. And so those dollar amounts to rip out that new asphalt, to put it in, is there. We didn't pull that out. If we didn't put 2 drinking fountains, we might have just put one lower because it was an elementary. We need to put one lower and one higher, and we may have missed that. And so it got hit as a thing, and we need to rip it out and do it. So there are some, and same way with the service counter, there was 2 heights of a service counter. May just be at the little height for the students, but it should have also had a higher height. And we didn't do that because we bought modular furniture, but we got dinged for it. So there are those things that are in I was surprised as well because they're brand new and they're wearing fine. It just, there are some things that are a little, that get hit and they're pretty costly.
It's really helpful. Thanks, Jake.
We ready to move on to this slide?
Yeah, so, remember I was talking at the last slide relative to the things that the FCI does not take into account. One of those is structural. So, our structural engineers that we consulted with, put together an assessment of each building. And the way that report comes out, we have a low, moderate, high, and very high risk categories. And each of the buildings is broken down into smaller pieces of building, and those are given their own categories. So you can see for example, at East Gresham, that's in the low risk category. Then we have some that have pieces or the entire building in the moderate or high risk. We have none identified in the very high risk category. So you can see how that falls out. We have kind of a summary on the side there. So Hall Elementary, Hollydale, no surprise since those are sister schools, Kelly Creek Elementary, and then pieces of Deep Creek Manassas K-8, pieces of Clear Creek Middle School, pieces of Gordon Russell Middle School.
And these are all broken down simply by when they were built. They'll have a different construction type often and or a different age. And so they're evaluated independently based on the year they were built. Yes.
I think it's funny that all but the 1920 side of West Orange is in the high risk. Maybe they must have built well.
Find that there's a magic to a single story wood frame building too. Yeah.
I would, so Barlow put an entirely new roof trusses, right, over the media center. No,
It didn't get that. So one of the pieces with the roofing, when we had to have the roof trusses, when we were going over those, some of those weren't done, but Barlow's it didn't cause that as a structural issue, but the gyms weren't done. So we do have issues with the gyms. The media center is still a span concern. But if we were able to roof that, but we weren't able to do the gyms because we'd had probably 2.5 times our costs and the roofs were maintained at those, the cafeteria wasn't, but the gyms were.
I mean, I guess it'd be helpful to have some detail. We don't have to do it now, but $86 million at Barlow High School, I don't think the community put that money in thinking that classroom wing media center and main gym would be a 0.5, like would be a high risk category structurally. And I feel like maybe there's some scrutiny to that would help us understand what the issues are.
So, and that would be good because that was what prevented us from actually doing all of the roof there. And when you do the roof, it ties it in structurally because there's certain codes you have to follow now. So that would be easy to be able to produce.
Yeah, and all of these, there's very detailed reports in the plan, exactly what Jerry's are talking about, and exactly what factors of those existing construction entities are triggering those kind of rankings.
And yeah, and sorry for the thought exercise, but I'm actually
Sure.
going through it.
Yeah.
I'm just processing out loud. I probably shouldn't do that right now. But if I'm coupling this with the previous, maybe the previous one, the one before that. Barlow, yeah, okay, but Barlow is way down at 5.3. So this is
Well,
talking about a replacement.
It's a little tricky.
Okay,
If you remember, this is as new when Barlow was first built, like for like, they don't take into account structural capacity in this at all. So structural isn't factored into this chart at all. The
okay,
next one, we take this information and how it's scored structurally, and then we overlay those together, and that's what can change some of those scores, in addition to all those other aspects too. That's what makes it a little confusing. That's why we do end up with kind of two scores. That previous slide is where ODE starts their facilities assessment. We really want to do that one step further
okay.
and consider all those other factors too. It's important.
That's something.
And then, for both Gresham and Barlow, we did not really, focus on the, athletic end of the facilities. And so there was a line and then, Gresham, the gym came in there because that was number two on the seismic. Number one was the auditorium and we were already replacing it and the seismic came in on the gym, same vintage, same 1940s. So that had to be done. And so that was done, but still the pools are both really around those 60s and the locker rooms, gyms.
I think it's helpful too for people that don't necessarily speak this language all the time, that it helped me to understand more that this is about seismic risk. So when you say structural, kind of relating those two together, it's just a lot more specific to seismic kind of, yeah, risk factors. Okay, and now Terry's gonna take over and talk about some of our other facilities and costs.
Nice. Thank you. I get to talk about some exciting facilities. During the last bond, we and the long range planning committee, we decided as a district, because of our capacity, we had we did an enrollment study at the time and rebounding some of the buildings and we built bigger elementary schools. And so we ended up closing Damascus campus and West Gresham campuses. We didn't know what we were gonna do at the time. At West Gresham, maybe everybody was thinking, okay, well, sell it. Maybe McMinimans will buy it. Wait, we need a district office. Wait, we need a place just for, we have a nice, let's use a building. Well, we can't use it for his kids because it's not safe. Let's put adults in there. And it's like, it's safe. It's a safe building. It just didn't work. It's not 10 acres that we wanted for an elementary school. It didn't fit capacity of 550, which is a standard that we created with the last bond. And so it just didn't work as an elementary school. So we have to figure out what to do with it. Then the same thing with Damascus campus. Damascus campus, it's just the enrollment down there in Damascus, that K-8 made sense. And so why run two schools at half capacity when we could build on, put 4 classrooms there? Now it's a K-8, it's working great. But we had 2 buildings that we did not fund. We put new locks in there because of we held them over during the month, so they were secure. We put the push button so you secure front ends. We didn't do any roofs, didn't do any mechanical. So those buildings really sat there at that time. And then at the district office, we haven't changed really since 95, since we unified as 4 districts. We're trying to get all those staff members from 4 districts in the DO. And then we were told we were supposed to leave. That the city's going to do some things and we need a little more space and there's no space for them. And all of a sudden now we really don't know what's going on, but we still are locked with our area there. And the city was gonna buy a piece of property or that we thought we might get. And so those things are the decision points that we need additional discussion. It needs to be said that West Gresham didn't work. We did have a study. If you remember back a few years ago, Scott Rose did a study. It was 20 million to make that building usable, like new, right? Well, I don't know if we'd want to build that building to make it look like new and use the same building. So we do have that information. And so right now, I don't think that's something that, we want to throw that out to the community, but we have not done that at Damascus. So what we did do, and James Hugh thought of this, and I don't know why we didn't do it sooner. One of the big things for the bond was to get the portables, get folks out of the portables. We had structured skills students at Springwater Trail. We had technology and portables. We were renting a building across from the DO for the SSSO building, and we're spending money we should. So let's consolidate that. We got a chance to do that at Damascus campus with our structured skills program there. It's working great. Our technology department's there and student support services at Damascus campus. At West Gresham, we have the adult living program that is expanded. I think they're 3 times as the size that they had before. They're actually able to do some programmatic things. They're just limiting in the portable that they had. And we also have coaches and other staff in the upstairs. So, and we have some curriculum work that we do over there. So those buildings are being occupied and we got out of those portables. We actually sold a few of the portables. We haven't figured out what we're doing with the money yet from its federal dollars, but we really did a good job, got them off-site, so the extra portables we're gonna maintain, and 3 of the 4 portables at Spring Orchard. So those are to be discussed. Are there any questions of those? They were studied by Bureau Veritas. They did come up quite high. And you think the ADA thing had something to do with East Gresham, just there was reams of paper come out of those, and I'm like, okay, I get it. So, okay. So, I think 2 slides ahead if we could, cost estimates. So the cost estimates, I think, critical maintenance, and really what we're looking at is, you know, are there things that came out of the Bureau Veritas that don't need to happen? 1.89 million for East Gresham when it's a brand new school is a little, you know, challenging. But what they're not talking about building anything new. They're just trying to, that's a lot of it is ADA. It's ripping down brand new stuff to fix it. And I wouldn't recommend it, but it's part of the study and it's part of it. So what we're gonna do with Bureau Veritas information is they did it statewide. They're looking at every building in the state and it's one firm doing it. They're bringing all that information back. And if you remember, not this group, it was the group that was, DCDKA came back real expensive. Well, the Bureau Veritas thing, so I'm gonna take out all the bookshelves. It's like you would do at your house after 20 years, you wanna modernize it. Well, we didn't need to modernize it. The bookshelves worked, right? So there were some things that auditor put in there that really need to be cleaned out. So they're gonna be there collecting all that information at the state level. When we said we had 600 million, that was what Gresham-Barlow said. And the next person or the next committee that sits here may not agree with that 600. Maybe they think it's, 12, whatever, 1.2 billion. So really that one group is going to do it, solidify for the state and say, how much is that gonna be statewide? Or are they gonna be facility needs? And so this is going to get updated again in 5 years, which I think will be a little bit cleaner. But right now, what they're saying at $14.5 million, you could get each story the way it is right now remodeled, that kind of money. Why would you do that? But they are not tasked with building a new building, right? So they're just tasked with all the finishes, mechanical systems. There's a steam boiler there, new pipes, new, turn it to hydronic systems, new flooring, new roof. And there's then the air conditioning in East Orient for glass school that we need air conditioning at. Probably change to a rooftop system that then would have structural implications and have to worry about that when you get all the ductwork on the roof. But those things are here. When you look at Hall and Hollydale, if you remember back when we talked about them in 1979, it was the open concept schools. All those walls were put in after the fact. The school was going to be that you had, it was built without a cafeteria and the office was in the middle of the building. And so they put the walls in, kind of creatively challenged the mechanical system, but it is tough to use that building that way. So that's gonna be another 6 million, going to put new walls in and make it the right way. Highland, just because the way that it is structurally, they've got some attic space. So you're really looking at that, $5 to $8 million per site just to get them renovation up on just finishes and mechanical systems, and they're there. So as you look down, there's some planning scopes, and then we also added the pool buildings, because we talked about trying to upgrade the pool buildings. It got to a point where do you stop? And we were able to do some finishes, some of the painting to the pools. I know that it gets real expensive at $1.5 million for both of those, but it takes some work. It's gonna be a real thoughtful process. And so all in all, those numbers came out from Bureau Veritas. Then I took them, and some of the things that they wrote in there, we did with our kitchens lately. We spent about $7 million on our kitchens that we had kitchen dollars for. So we took some of the things out that Bureau Veritas put in there. You need new cooler freezer boxes for that. Well, we were able to do 8 of those over the last 2 summers. We had some floor finishes in kitchens that need to be upgraded. We got new flooring, we got new equipment, and so it was a nice ability to do that. But we're at $143 million right now, $144 million, and what finishes and mechanical systems really are to be upgraded.
Well, and Terry, isn't it part of it too, like, typically you might have to replace carpet every however many years, but if you're taking really, really good care of something, just like anything else, that lasts longer than the average.
Appreciate you
Take
saying
good care of things, yeah.
That's one of the things that, I really pride our crew about is really the care of the systems, the care of the mechanical systems, our roof. As you know, we're dubbed as the most energy efficient school district in America by AEPA. We don't do that by disregard to the facilities. We really maintain them well. And so when you look at a building that's over 50 years old, ASHRAE says in 25 years, you need to change this stuff out, and it's still rolling at 50 years. You know, I've only been here for 22 years, and it was in a great spot when we got here. We just refined those things. We changed out the ones that were critical needs, but as it is, it's really the envelope. You know, you're really looking at $33 million for the envelope. You have to do a new roof, you have to do siding. It's just like going in a home, roofs and things, they only last so long. Interior finishes, of course, you know. I would love to paint every 7 years inside a classroom, and, you know, it's just tough, and that's what they're seeing, right? So mechanical systems, it really speaks to it a lot right there at only 25 million mechanical. Because we did a lot of that in the last bond, but that should be a lot higher. We do have some electrical things that are getting to its life's end. We are doing a few things there, but you know, that's just really service related. And the rest is, you know, we have a few side things, but as you break it down in there, what we did in the last bond is we break it out into these types of information, just so you have an idea. It's like, do we have envelope problems? Do we have structural problems? Do we have really limitations anywhere? So it's another way to see the information of what we have.
And I'll add to that, and this is hard to add. The skeleton crew that you're working with for $500 million in facilities is one electrician.
Yeah.
One carpenter.
Yeah.
One plumber.
The
It's
plumbers
you
are-
and Alan.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then it's our custodians and
Yeah.
foreign grounds people
yeah.
for $500 million in facilities. So they're doing really, really good work with very few resources.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, John. They
I won't
take
do it
pride,
again.
they take a lot of pride in what they do. If you guys go to night custodian at Barlow, he'll text me, he goes, I think the mechanical unit's running. Could you check it, make sure you turn it off, because we don't need it. You know, it's like, they're managing energy and they're also doing the PM work. It's really a culture. It's just a good team for that.
I'll add a whole nother layer.
Was
My
that?
son's getting de facto Spanish lessons from my.
Oh.
custodian at Barlow. I've got some new word every day.
Oh, man. Alan's taking Spanish. He's taking some nice classes so he can learn. And I might be a little long in the tooth to learn more, but.
We believe in you, Terry.
So this is really that study that came out and really where your dollars are, and it looks at it in a little bit different graph. And Tracy, it did flip with North. Your leadership at North had proved that it was successful. See, we don't need as much here, and truly it was nice to be able to see that. Springwater Trail is a nice building that really fits the program well. So really you're seeing those things. The fix that, you know, really is, it's those top end schools. When you're looking at McCarty, and it was built the same year as Barlow, 1968. But they both have challenges with no outside windows, right? So do you put a solo tube in there? Do you take out a wing and get, you know, there's issues there. That solo tubes, back when Jim Schlachter was here, we tried to get them in the school just to get some natural light in the classrooms. And at some point you gotta keep cutting budget, you know, to make everything fit, because everybody wants more. But the repair costs by site are right here, and so that's where you see East and West Orange so high. So from a recommendation standpoint, committee really, the repair replace came up with East Orient, West Orient, and it really was tough to repair those. And because the last group decided that we wanted to build a new middle school, demographics, the way things are going, you know, someone threw out the idea, put in KA, it works in Damascus, and, you know, someone in that area is like, well, that might work. The others might say that doesn't work. That's not the charge of this group, right? This group says it needs to be fixed, and to your point, right? what's next is, okay, what do we do? And do we have, should that be a charge that came out of here? And so it's really repair, replace due to the values of it and the construction where it is. And when in K8, seems like it would be a natural there in that area for it.
And I will say, it's always felt like a K-8, because basically it's a K-8 school separated by a baseball field.
Yeah, yeah. Space wise,
like
it
that.
fits, it fits the acreage. If you're able to do that and say you tore down the older side of West and built it up and you got that 92 side, and now you have a building big enough for K8, and you'd have enough space for parking and.
When I was out there, it was 5-8. We had 5th grade.
Yeah.
West Orange.
So then the lighter touch things that happened, so Kelly Creek was a 92 building and it got finishes, really didn't need too much. We are right on the heels of replacing the boilers there, so when things happen, they're unfortunate, too bad they didn't fail during the bond, we could have replaced them with the bond dollar. But those boilers, sectional cast iron boilers cracked. Powell Valley, a little older than that, really interior finishes in middle schools. We really worked on the 2 big elementary schools and both high schools, and it was just a huge focus. And then we went to all classrooms. Want to make sure educational adequacy that was a big piece for us. We're gonna make sure sites is at the high school and every classroom gonna, just the panels on the front and sound systems and the emergency systems and the security systems and all those things were equitable across the district. But the middle schools, we put in the STEM classrooms, but we didn't have the programmatic side of that done yet, nor could we staff them. But the buildings have enough utilities to be able to make those buildings work. But the classrooms at all those elementaries here, they could do more things, right? And so that's what came out of the study, and so the middle schools are, and so really addressing the envelope, which is not exciting, and I didn't push for it, I didn't need to see it, but really parking lots are not exciting for me, but we need to get to them, and roofs and parking lots are not fun, no one wants to pay for them, but
Not
they've got to be
glamorous.
there. And so then again, next steps are, what do we do, West Gresham, Damascus, and district office? So that's recommendation committee and then additional top. Question? I guess. Yeah.
Feel like we would benefit from a field trip. Just to walk through some buildings with you, Terry. I think it would be helpful to see some of this, and I'm not sure how to structure that, but yeah.
I would love to do that. I am so proud of what the community has supported and what's going on. We did take the committee to, some of the old buildings and, got a chance to see it, but, really what did say the high school get, or maybe some of the school get, and then go to a middle school and say, okay, what do you think we could do for that? And really put some context really to what the report said. Yeah, I think that would help. Sure. Sarah Tracy, you heard it, John did, but if I would definitely be, helpful on a tour, it'd be great, whatever that would be interesting.
The other message that I just want to kind of center is, the other thing, and I was just coming onto the board, so these weren't my choices to make. I would have been proud to have made the same ones. But this community is different than other neighboring communities. And when we brought in this bond, these buildings are beautiful. But we don't have one HVAC controller from Belgium in one school and one from Italy in another school, which is what neighboring districts are dealing with. And we, the committee, the bond oversight committee and the district leadership who are making the choices really delivered sustainable buildings to this community, as sustainable as you can do in a bond. And I think I just, I'm not trying to pick any enemies. I just want to reiterate that to our community, we asked for $290 million of buildings and we delivered $290 million and more in value. And no, we're not coming to you and asking for a bond. We know how you're feeling because we live in this community and we feel the same things you do. But when that day comes and you need to invest in your schools, just know that we've taken this very seriously this last round, and we've tried to honor that commitment that we made to you. And that's we as a collective district, even if they were new phases of time, so.
And I think I appreciate you saying that what came out of the bond and Mike Schofield and Jim Schlachter at the time, what would work with the community, and it wasn't. Barlow Gresham sites really had to be met, and we ended up getting 2 brand new schools for the Gresham site, but what Barlow got a tremendous, value there, but really you referenced it a little bit, we did standardize operations, which really helps with very few people to maintain it, but we have one control system. Right, I have one key to the district.
Yeah.
And when I asked Michelle, when I first started, because I was from a district that had capital planning and pieces up in Washington, their funding's different. And I said, can we just standardize the keys to make it easier? Because I had a bag of keys, like a ring for each school when I got there. Yeah, and it was just, so I had just a big fanny pack of keys. Some guys kept in a coffee can and they just kept in their truck and what school. But we had, so it's the same type of roof, across the board, it's the same type of boilers, the same kind of water heaters, same kind of faucets, everything that we did, we standardized. It was a little bit different when we got to mechanical, because we couldn't get everything there, but at least we standardized the operation of what it would be. And we got, so when you look at a classroom, the finishes are all the same, we have one color of white paint in the district. So, it's that, right, whitetail, that's the only one. And we have 4 pallets of paint, so they could pick, and Tracy, because she's cool, she got 2 pallets. Okay, she did blue and green, so that's cool, but she's a boss, she can do what she wants. But as it is, thank you, that really is a sustainable way to maintain it, is, that variety is tough to manage, and what we call it, when we first got here, with 5 control systems, it was really a Jeopardy room, which, how are you gonna manage it? And now it's, once you train once, you know how to do them all.
The other thing I had to, I said I wasn't gonna say more good things, but I will again, and this is also for Mike Milton too. The vision that you all put together in the bond pass, because I still wasn't at the district office yet. You enhanced it during COVID, because that money could be used for HVAC. So we further standardized our systems, made them more efficient during that time. Mike has been focused on grants that support how do we integrate our safety systems more efficiently, and we've made huge progress on that. We are a model for the state because we've stayed with that same vision 10 years later. So all of that vision was really forward thinking, and it's helped us continue to improve.
Thank you for saying that, because I really appreciate having Mike in that position, because that level of focus on what's been going on, and if we have an issue, you go right to that door, the camera looks right at it. You can access it all from any place. I can access it from here, I can access it from my phone.
And it all came from that original vision.
It
all put together to pass the ball.
So. Chris, you were on the committee, do you have any?
I thought it was actually a very wonderful opportunity. In fact, the committee was so engaged with what was going on, we wanted to extend the meetings because we were having such a good, robust conversation.
I don't always have the same memory.
It was when you stepped out of the room.
Oh.
And you said, okay, we can keep going now. But it was something where there was definitely the conversation about the building, the school, the function. And I appreciated that this group also talked at quite a length about how do we use our buildings? What do we see the future of education? What do we see the future of the buildings? Flexibility in using the schools, flexibility in using the buildings. And 2 other things. One of them was we talked about how we use the space and how we use the space to be efficient in terms of heating, lighting. Like Terry was saying about using just one color of white paint so that we're not having to mix and match different colors. And sometimes going into our buildings, it may appear that a school is full, But it's been changed a little bit because we don't have 12 kids in a classroom. And so we've moved some of the spacing around with that. Sitting here as well in this lovely building that was rebuilt from the building that I went to many years ago across the parking lot. And I was fortunate, I was supposed to come and have a walkthrough with the principal here. She was unavailable. So the custodian who had been at both buildings, who I knew from many, many years, said, I'll take you and I'll show you. And he reiterated some of the very same things that Terry just talked about, how it was when he was in the other building with a pocket full of keys, with all the different lights, with all the different things. The heating system didn't work right. You couldn't set a control that would keep the heat on during the day and turn it off at night. And how much easier it was to run and manage and support this building with the improvements. And he said it's not perfect. But, you know, I would encourage, we're gonna go on a field trip with Terry, it sounds like. I don't know if we're going on a field trip with John. I think I'm going with Tracy. But also if you get an opportunity to go do a walkthrough with your building custodian, if they're amenable to that. You know, again, I had a relationship that I knew the custodian for many, many years. And he was willing to walk me through because not only did he understand the components of the building structure, but he also had that piece of, and this space here is where we can do multi-student work. This space here can be flipped and used for something else. This space here isn't always the same content. So he got that. And I think we have a lot of employees in our district who also get that. And I think when we had the committee, that came through as well, that people were looking at what are we using our buildings for? How are we gonna get there? And how are we gonna support? And there were conversations about our older buildings. And I was just kind of going back through some of our other bond work that we've done. And not all of our bonds have passed over the years. And we would love to do everything every time. But there is a limit on how much we can do. And so I think this district has done a very good job of making sure that we're staying on top of and in a better way. We're not letting things fall apart before we say we have to get them worked on and fixed. So all in all, I was very pleased that I got to be a part of the third one of these I've been on, because one of them was when I was still a community member. So I see improvement, I see growth, and continuing to have a forward-thinking view of what does it mean for education and what does the space that we need to have for that education. So anyhow.
As a side for this building and the number of keys, there is a piece of artwork downstairs built out of the keys from the old building. In case someone needs some perspective about what that looks like.
Yeah. So I will say that, after we built the bond out, Mike, or during that, before Jordan got here, Mike met with all the facilities folks and was just, you know, having a heart to heart and how do you like the buildings are all good? And he said, okay, now step it up. We have to maintain them. This community's behind it. Now we can't let them go down. And to that point of the custodians, they feel so much better. And, you know, when you have something nice and shiny, you'd like to keep it that way. And, you know, we'd like to be able to say that we could do everything. And at the time, it's just, but the pride in with what's going on with it, it does go down to, everybody likes the new stuff. But that challenge came right after we got into building them. And really it's, you know, to support what our district leadership's trying to do. And what do you want? You want to attract more kids. You want people to drive by. You want them to live in your community. And to your point about our neighboring communities, you know, I feel really happy that we're able to pass the bond. And, you know, I know that some others are not able to do that. And so we got lucky in there and it'd been a while, but what a home run it was. And, you know, now we have some, you know, some other needs, but I think the way that we're maintaining it right now, I think is really from the leadership saying, okay, we still are committed. So.
Does any of the studies say anything about safety? In terms of like East and West Orient, they have the biggest needs for repair or replace. So does that signify that they're the least safe? Like, are the students at any type of risk?
So the safety and security was the number one thing we did on the last bond. And so the thing that we did there was really change the front ends, change how we get into the building, all that card access, the key access, the security cameras, all of those pieces have been increased.
I'm
And
sorry,
the
I
way,
mean like structural in.
oh, so
structural
seismic,
safety,
yes,
yeah.
so all the new buildings actually were raised up to be community shelters that east and north, and the entrances to the high schools were there. There wasn't seismic issues that caused us when we did go and do roofs. We did tie those in seismically, so they are safer at that point from a structure standpoint. There weren't too many things other than the classroom doors and things from the key standpoint, but there wasn't a drastic need on the seismic piece to really do that. But we did increase when we did get a chance for the elementary school.
The next building that we're doing some seismic review is West Gresham, where
That's
we have a
correct.
seismic
And
grant.
that 20 million that came in from the study, that was also sent to the engineer, and they have all that, so that's hollow clay tile. And it's just that front end, right, where that is, but that building, you know, is high on the list. Chris?
So one of the things about safety is partly, because we didn't have as efficient of a climate control system. We had doors that were left propped open, we had windows that were left propped open, we had access that was propped open. So by creating a better climate control, we were actually able to improve safety of having the building be limited to where people could go in and out. And so that was a small piece, but it was a big piece, you know what I mean? So.
And that was a point of the design for Gresham High School. I think when we started, there were 76 outside doors. And yeah, that they use, right? And we limited that to 5 entries. So, and they're timed open, and they're there for the daycare side and special ed, and then the gym and the main entry, and then after that, it's locked down to the main entry and card access only. So,
With that said, though, East Orient is still without AC, and so that
Right,
particular benefit of safety is not there. Cooling ones.
they don't have the outside doors, but the windows are issues, and that is the one piece that I've pushed the committee and shared with our administration that, you know, I don't think it can last 10 years. I think it needs to be studied and figure out how it can be remedied. And, you know, you're into that $2.5 million to put a comprehensive system in rooftop and to be able to do that. And right now with the budget challenge, I'll keep pushing for it, but that's our district's place right now where we do need it.
But I would say overall, from what I've seen, and maybe Marlene and Megan can chime in, I don't see that our schools are rated, like us as a district seems to be about what many other districts are in terms of seismic and kind of what the needs might be from some of the stuff I've seen, but.
If you wanted to compare, relatively to other districts, I'd say between the seismic work and the general work that's been done in the district. Obviously, the mechanical, you're way ahead of all of your neighbors by far, and seismic, yes. It comes down to the age of the building, the fact that the bond work that you did, took care of a lot of the older buildings. That's a huge benefit, but every district in Oregon has a list similar to that says, these are the buildings that are most at risk of falling down in the event of a seismic, kind of event.
And there was one more higher risk category
Yeah.
that we don't have any buildings in, correct?
Yeah, there's an even deeper red that's just like very, very get your attention. Yeah, and the grant program that's been utilized is a great effective way to kind of try and rectify those issues whenever possible. Yeah.
That's good. A question for a future conversation, but I know the value of a geo bond in all schools tend to go for geo bonds. Are there other lending options that would ever allow a district like ours to attack smaller issues on a capital basis? Would be a question to have for the future considerations if we're trying to solve some of these next steps without a geo bond.
Well, prior to the bond and prior to Pete, we were gonna have to do something at Barlow because we had,
No matter what. Yes.
we had 60 or so roof leaks at Barlow. We needed $3 million to redo the roof at Barlow. So if we didn't pass the bond, we were gonna go out and get a loan. just like you would for your house, right? So we would have to do something, so throw it back to Pete, I mean, that'd be something that we'd have to look at for, okay, can we do something that would get us that money to be able to get to that HVAC, or, that HC upgrade? And when we do that, there's units in the classroom that are steam units that, and we did it at North and the old East Gresham, was you had air conditioners on the roof and heaters on the wall, and so they fought each other. And so I would like to turn off, I wouldn't be able to renovate them for that 2.5 million, but I could at least isolate them and have a heating and ventilating coming in and air conditioning come in from the rooftop and have it all ducted to it, which would be in that range.
Just shooting from the hip, and one parting thought for me would be, there's a whole lot of state programs and federal programs for infrastructure. And our state and our federal government have put schools in a position where local communities tend to be the ones who pay for their schools, and that makes sense. But when we look at advocacy, a lot of those infrastructure programs are favorable loan terms for, cities or special utility districts. It might be nice to see some advocacy for novel programs on that front. To bail out communities like ours that are gonna be bond averse. To help us address some of these problems without major scope. That'd be. Floating it out there, when we go to advocate with those communities, it'd be kind of nice to start pitching that, because. We don't have a luxury in Portland, we can't just put something on a ballot either.
Standard button.
Yeah. All right, any other thoughts? That's fine. David, did you have anything? No.
Can I just thank Marlene and Megan again, and just for all of your work and all of your partnership, and of course Terry, I mean, obviously. Very amazing, and it was funny, Director Howe, when you were talking about the custodians, when I first got hired here that first week of July, no one was really working. But they brought me my badge, like my first day, so I'm like, I'm going to all the schools, so it's looping my way into everything. And met a lot of custodians, tried not to scare them, like came in the door, was like, I'm walking. There's nobody in there, it's silent, and the time people took with me to talk about how much they loved their school and loved this district was just like affirming to my decision to come here. So thankful for the whole team and for your leadership as well. And really good experience. So thank you.
And I just give special recognition, Chris was the only board member on, who's still on the board. And we also have John Hudsock here, who's on the visionary board that got the bond passed, so. Want to also thank them. So, thank you, Marlene, Megan. That's great. All right, I would say we'll recess for about, we need 10, let's do 10. All right, that clock right there says 7:09, so we'll go 7:19.
If you need restrooms, there.
Sorry.
So have that bottom line. Have that bottom.
They are great, and they don't know what. And go.
Chris. Chris,
Yo,
I thought you said this would be a short meeting.
which was it?
I thought you said this would be a short meeting.
No, I changed my mind. I wanted to have pumpkin pie, and so it's gonna be actually another 2-3 hours.
Oh, boy.
No.
And ice cream.
No.
You know, and then we're gonna have nap time, and then, I'm gonna go for a walk and wander around the building. You want me
Alright.
to meeting back on the road?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
We're gonna reconvene. And our next information item is a budget update. You want me to introduce this, or would you like to introduce it?
Kick us off.
So, first, thank you to our budget committee members. I saw some folks online and
Yep.
you all in the room for being here and being part of this journey with us. The community is gonna need you, more than ever in your tenure. And, we're gonna explore some of the challenges that are ahead of us. And we've got Pete and Tracy and the team to help get us through that, but I'll chime in from time to time. I'm sure I encourage everybody else to chime in from time to time, because what the district staff is ultimately looking for is they're kind of what we call an azimuth check. Make sure that we know what kinds of decisions are gonna be hitting them, what kinds of assumptions are gonna be hitting them, and when they can start to validate some of those, because by the time we get to March and April, we're gonna have decisions to make to help guide the future of this district. So with that.
Thank you. Yeah, this is really kind of that like lay of the land. What are we facing kind of conversation? It's not so much a solve all the world's problems tonight, but really just kind of paint the picture of where we're at and what we believe we'll be facing. I just want to make sure people know Pete. He is our director of finance. He's been with the district a number of years, but has moved into a new role. And we also have Kevin Holden here, who is actively involved in creating our budget. So it's good for him to be here as a part of the conversation as well. And then we have Michael Sweeten over there, who's human resources. And so some of this work can be connected to that as well. And then our assistant deputy superintendent, Sarah and John, just so some of you know who is in the room with us today. So our goals for tonight, just kind of paint some context and some background about why we're here. Give you an update on where we're at in terms of this year's budget and what we see on the horizon for us. We do see some challenges ahead. And we do want to gather some feedback from you to inform some next steps in terms of some guiding principles. So hopefully on this slide, there's not a lot of information that is new, but we also have some new board members, so some of this context is important. So last year, we know that the legislature allocated $11.36 billion for the biennium. This is the first year of the biennium. We needed $12.1 billion to maintain our current service level from last year. So we did make significant reductions last year to our budget, just over $8 million. Earlier it was shared, but I just want to reiterate here. One of the things that we're pleased with is that the enrollment numbers that we used to build our budget last spring were pretty darn accurate. We were a hair above that. So we don't have any issues related to what did we build the budget on related to enrollment. We don't have an additional gap there. But our enrollment is trending down for the next 10 years. Our last presentation showed some of the numbers behind that. And we all are probably in our personal lives experiencing just the craziness of inflation and what's going on with the economy and how unpredictable some of these things are right now.
So I kind of wanted to start with a budget 101 mini version to just really get folks back up to speed. So just real quickly talking about the general fund, where is the money coming from? Where does it go? So as you can see here, the money, the vast majority of the general fund revenue comes from the state. That's mostly what's called the SSF, the state school fund. And when I say mostly, I mean 98%.
Local revenue is local taxes, unique to Multnomah County and this community, and then other sources is anything else. So as you can see, big story here is the vast majority is from the state, comes from that state school fund. So if we go forward, hey, there it is,
There it is.
98%. And this is the same chart that y'all just saw, but presented a little bit more starkly, showing that steady decrease in enrollment. Why is that so important? Because the SSF formula, state school fund formula, is based off of enrollment. If you want to get really technical and push your glasses up like me, it's called ADMW, ADMR, but those are functions of enrollment. But anyway, so that steady decline means that we see steady declines in revenue related to that SSF.
Could I ask a clarifying question on
Sure.
this? Declining enrollment is one thing for us. How does that affect if statewide is in a declining enrollment? How does that affect our portion of it?
Wow, great question. So we'll get a little bit more into that later, but the answer is all other things being equal and with the control mechanisms in place from the state, because SSF is truly a very complex formula. There's a lot to it. Overall, it does trend down, but it is not a 1-to-1 ratio. Yeah.
So just, well, maybe I'll answer it like, because this is a question I've always had, similar to like. Is like, okay, well, let's say we have an overall statewide enrollment dip. But they've budgeted X amount of dollars. Does that mean that every district gets more? Or is it like in a very simple layman's term?
To answer that question as best I can in the limited time frame.
Yes.
Overall, you would see a dip, but it is not a 1-to-1 ratio. We can get more into the weeds with how the SSF formula works if you'd like.
Yeah.
But it is complex.
We're not taking into account of weighting.
Yeah.
But in the past, I don't know where we are statewide now, we've been about 1.7 to 1.9% of the total population of the state. So you can do rough math.
Yeah.
When stuff is coming out for every 100 million, it would be about 1.7 million for us.
Yeah, so basically what summarizing is that the state is accounting for this dip in enrollment. And those funds are probably going somewhere else in the state versus education.
I can't say anything that clear.
Okay, got it.
Because the state formula has so many layers to it, and again, we can build a chart to go as deep as you want
No.
in a future time.
Yeah, it's okay. I was just wondering if I.
No, I appreciate it. So when we contrast the last 10 years of declining enrollment with what's been happening with FTE, otherwise known as full-time equivalent, which is roughly about how many people are employed, you don't see perfect alignment as far as the trend trajectory. However, as you can see in the last 2 years, 23, 24, 24, 25, 25, 26, they are in alignment, or at least much more so. And I think a question that many people might ask is, why was there such a large uptick in 2021? A lot of that actually had to do less with the pandemic and more to do with the onboarding of the SIA program, which was based off the corporate activity tax, which was a statewide initiative to really supplement schools in a different way than regular property tax. Tracy, did you want to say anything about SIA on that front?
Not a lot. I mean, ESSER is a part of that.
Yes, it
And I
absolutely
would
is.
say that where you see us, this year is probably the growth that was directly related to state grants as opposed to ESSER. And ESSER is kind of that 1,100 and like above. So we're kind of, because ESSER is now gone, and our funding for SIA has been pretty flat. We're staffed about where we would have been then without that ESSER bubble. And we worked really intentionally to have a lot of that staffing that's a part of that bubble be temporary staffing. So we kind of worked some of that away as we ended that grant.
That's beautifully succinctly put.
Oh, good.
Better than I could have said. All right, so,
SIA is SIA.
oh, sorry, yes.
You
thank
did
you.
best for it.
Student investment.
Yes.
Yeah.
So moving on to where does the money go? So we just talked about where does the money come from? Where does it go? As you can see here, it goes a lot of places, but the vast majority, 67%, is going to actual people's paychecks. It's going to payroll, salary, benefits. The next largest chunk, which is purchase services, is also people's paychecks, but to another company. It's to First Student for transportation, it's to Chartwell's for food service. So those are also, people's paychecks. It's just, it's not coming direct from the district. So a vast majority is going to people. If we want to move on to the next.
Yeah, well, this is that today. So Tracy asked me to present to the Chamber Leadership Group today, so those are all business owners. And when they saw, they knew right away, when they saw that 85 to 87% of our budget is people. When you really kind of want to be at 75%, because then you have flexibility to cut. They knew and asked the question directly, well, that means if you're in reductions, class sizes go up. This happens, these things. I said, yes, that's a position that we're in because we don't have flexibility.
And that's true with our grants. Our grants, I haven't done the exact math on it, but our grants are really saturated with staffing, and especially this year, because the reductions that we made to general fund last year, a lot of those, like to try to keep some of those jobs, went to the grants, and then the grants pushed other things out. So our grants are really saturated with staffing as well.
So this is just a different view of the exact same slide from before, but just highlighting what percentage of that district payroll cost is PERS. It's significant. It's 17% of overall payroll and 11% of the overall budget, just in PERS.
One more addition again, if you don't mind. Pete said this and it finally resonated with me this week because I didn't make the connection. So with declining student enrollment, you also have declining staff. When you have declining staff, you have less money going into PERS, which means that tier 1 problem gets exacerbated and doesn't get solved as quickly as we thought. Because less money is going into that fund. There's a slide for that.
All right, so when we take a moment to really look at where we are at this fall, so our budget reality for this fall. What we have learned after doing a couple months of payroll is that we are projected to be over budget by about just over $1 million in staffing costs. So how did that happen? As I described, we moved lots of people around to different grants. We did reduce over 45 positions. And there were a lot of different factors that kind of played into that. Overall, we're not terribly disappointed by being about $1 million off of what we were trying to do with avoiding a RIF and some of the things that we were able to do. We're overall pretty pleased with that. The other thing to note is down at the bottom there. So ATTW is additions to timed work. So if we have a teacher that stays for an evening event, we pay them, it's not overtime, but we pay them their hourly rate to be there. That's ATTW. And so we can still influence that number in a positive way through HTW savings and through sub-cost savings. So we're really working hard on that right now. We know that September is probably one of the most expensive ATTW months because we have open houses, we have people getting ready for school to start. There's a lot that happens for the startup of school. So we're actively working on our HTW. We also, our staff has been working really hard to be at work. And so we've seen some decrease in staff absences, which is also an opportunity for us to have a little savings here. Connected to that though, is PERS. And so for PERS, we're projected to be over budget by about $3.6 billion. This is mostly related just to what PERS does. So Pete's going to spend some time kind of talking through that again. And again, this number can be positively impacted through savings in HCW and sub costs. You want to add anything before I go on?
No. So I'll try to give as brief a explanation of PERS as I can, because just like with the SSF state school fund formula, there's a significant amount of complexity here. But one thing I think that's really important, especially if you're not used to thinking about this stuff, is that PERS is a retirement account. It's a huge retirement account. And as a retirement account, The rules are set by the Oregon legislature. We have no say in PERS. No one at this table, unless you're on the legislature, has a say in the PERS rules. Those are set by the legislature. And a massive majority of PERS revenue is an investment account that's managed by the Oregon Treasury Department. So the PERS account is trying to actively manage a portfolio, centralize risk, attempt to beat the market. They're being asked to do a very difficult job. And one thing that really struck me when I started to dive in to kind of create these slides, you can go to the next one, is this is from the PERS website. And it's just very starkly showing how much money comes from investments versus how much comes from either employer or employee actual payments into the system. And because it's over decades, it's a retirement account over decades for most folks. So the investment is 75% of what's happening with actual PERS benefit payments. So if we move on, what's been happening with those PERS investments? Well, we can see there's a lot of ups and downs. And I don't think we need to dive into any details here. You all know that markets are volatile. But the last time that the PERS rates were set in 2021, they were observing a 14.3% return. And just after that, as you can see, the line has gone down significantly. So particularly the last few years, this is the most current data that PERS has. Obviously, that's a few years behind, but we're significantly below, and that's just, those are the markets. You invest the best you can as a PERS administrator, but there's markets too. So if we move on to the next slide, yeah. So we have three things unfortunately going on right now statewide. This is not a district problem. This is a statewide problem. So state PERS is not making as much on investments as they were hoping. So that's point one. Point two, couple that with a massive unanticipated increase in overall wages beyond what PERS last expected when they set rates. That's due in part to recent bargain wage increases statewide. That's not unique to this district. This is across the state. And then point three, to the point that John was making, steady statewide declining enrollment means less employees are participating in PERS. So there's less going in. So when you combine those three factors, what you get overall is an increased burn rate through existing PERS dollars. And what PERS has to do as a state or organization, when things are burning faster, the money's going away faster than they anticipated, is they have to raise rates. So that brings us to the next slide. These are the actual rate increases we saw. We don't need to get into the details here, but you can see I kind of highlighted the Gresham-Barlow line item there. So the last biennium from 23 to 25, the rates for tier one or OPSERT, which are the two types of PERS plans that we offer, not that we offer, that the state offers, is 12.9 and 10.1%. And in the next biennium, they jumped to 20 and 17%. That is well above the rate of inflation. That's almost double the rate of inflation. But that's what the PERS administrators needed to do because of those other three factors that I was just speaking about. And so that's why those PERS numbers jumped so substantially just in 1 year.
So that just kind of summarizes locally for Gresham-Barlow, we have a $4.6 million, $4.7 million challenge from last year that we're going to need to work to resolve. And sadly, that's not our only challenge. So as we look at state and federal budget challenges that lie ahead, HR 1, otherwise known as the Big Beautiful Bill, means that our state will receive about $600 million less in revenue for this biennium. So in October, all of the departments, all of the Oregon departments, including the Department of Education, were asked to make proposals for a 5% reduction. And those will be presented in the legislative session that starts in February. For the Oregon Department of Ed, that includes that state school funds, our biggest chunk of money, as well as SIA or the cap tax grant that we get, as well as Measure 98, another grant that we get. In addition, Oregon receives $15 billion in federal funds. That's not just for schools, that's also for Medicare, SNAP, other benefits. But there's a lot of conversation around federal funding and what is going to happen with that. And then we just still have a lot of uncertainty related to tariffs, inflation, and what might be to come. You've also probably heard me talk about unfunded mandates. We have some additional unfunded mandates coming our way. Senate Bill 3, that is a new graduation requirement for us to provide personal finance and career pathways for students. And we have to start next year. And so we're looking at different ways to repurpose staff to achieve that, but ultimately, we have some FTE needs to add there to meet that requirement. There's a new accountability bill from this last legislative session. It's a little less clear on exactly what that might cost us in the short term. There's some required assessments and some data reporting that we would need to do. Part of that, is a current contract's likely to meet requirements. We do have some assessments that we use that do meet kind of the letter of the law, if those assessments are approved and on the list that the state will give us to choose from. It also means that if we were in a position to want to reduce those contracts or eliminate those contracts, we wouldn't be able to, because now they're a part of requirement for the state. So that one, in terms of what's the dollar amount there, is a little more fuzzy. And PBAM, what's PBAM?
Program Budgeting Accounting Manual,
Yes.
rolls off the tongue.
Yes, PBAM, I just call it PBAM. Is really looking at restructuring how we do our budget coding systems. And that's related to the accountability bill in terms of being able to more closely identify, we've spent this chunk of money and gotten this result. There are some costs associated with that in terms of software expenses that would not be covered by the state. And there's a significant need for staff training and just kind of, there's a whole lot to that if I let Pete start talking, we'll be here all night.
And I will
Ray,
flip
you
a table. It's so much in flux.
Yeah.
We're not ready to present quite on PBAM, but we know that a fundamental change is coming. It's not just like, we're gonna add an extra set of codes. It's a fundamental redesign of the entire accounting system,
32-0,
maybe.
okay.
And lucky for me, and maybe less lucky for Pete, Pete is a part of a statewide conversation and doing some planning around that because of his exquisite accounting skills. Which means we stay in the know. So overall impacts, what are we really facing? So we shared the about $4.7 million of salary and PERS from this year. Our ending fund balance for this year is projected to be about $10.3 million, which is 6% of our total expense. Board policy requires 8%. The state shortfall of $600 million due to HR 1 and just some of the other federal impacts that we, don't really know what those are going to look like. But what we did learn last week, so this was a bit of good news, and we'll talk about this more on the next slide as well, is the Oregon Department of Education had to lay out their plan for that 5% cut that they were gonna make. And at one point, they were talking about mid-year cuts for us. Their proposal that they made last week did not include mid-year cuts and pushes it all into next year with some other creative things that they're doing, which is a big relief. That they have a path forward that doesn't include that, but ultimately the state legislature will make that decision and they could say, nope, we're gonna do this instead. So.
To remind you the scope of the ending fund balance too, last year, and I don't know the daily cost this year, last year it cost $680,000 to run the district for a day. So an ending fund balance of 10.3 million gives us about a half a month's operating cost, which is not a very comfortable place to be in.
Can you remind me, I know it was either this budget or one of the very recent previous budgets, we had known that we were going to go below that with the hopes that we would maybe realize some gains to go back up to the 8%. Was that this budget?
So that was in March. John and I presented that to you. So our goal last year was to make cuts deep enough that it would carry us through this year without cuts. And so what that would have meant is we would have needed to end this year, and I have to look back at the presentation. I feel like it was like 9.5% or so ending fund balance. That then in the second year of the biennium would drop below the 8%. but then we'd be able to get through the whole biennium without a second round of cuts.
Yeah.
This changes that.
HR one, all the other things, the PERS increases, change it all substantially. It's just stuff that we couldn't have anticipated.
So ultimately, the last bullet there is we're gonna need to be making some more reductions this year. And there are a lot of moving parts in terms of what does that number even start to look like. So I like a spreadsheet. So I just started making a list. Thank you, Nick, for the
I see my-
spreadsheet. So in the orange there, so I just started listing kind of like, what are all the things that we know in this moment that honestly could change tomorrow or next week or 2 months from now. So the 25-26 right sizing, that's that $4.7 million with a little extra because everything's gonna cost more next year. The state shortfall, that 2.5%, ODE was asked to create two different 2.5% reduction plans. So there was the first 2.5 and then there was the second 2.5. In more of their recent conversations, they really think that they're going to be looking at that first 2.5 chunk. So the $3.1 million is the Gresham-Barlow. That's 2.5% of our budget. So to kind of make up for some of the state shortfall, that could be where we're at. Looking at how to restore the ending fund balance to 8%, that's about $3.5 million. Federal money likely. So these are funds that have already been parts of conversations in terms of being reduced at the federal level. So that's Title II, Title III, Title IV, and 21st Century grants. So those are some very specific programs that seem to be on the chopping block as we move forward. Less likely is that next line, Title I, which is one of our larger federal grants. We aren't hearing the same kind of conversation around Title I, but it's on here because it could go. So people ask how much that is. That's about $2.9 million. The next two, are both state grants. So the Student Investment Account, or the SIA, is from the CAT tax. And then High School Success is really for CTE. So you've heard us talk about those over the years. But those are some anticipated reductions based on some of the other things happening with the state.
Tracy, didn't you just say on the other side that we need to increase our CTE, but on here you're saying it's gonna be reduced? That there's some kind of requirement to?
The financial, the personal finance and the career pathways.
Yeah,
Those credits, they're not CTE.
okay.
We could use some of that, if that grant had enough money in it to add that, we could look at doing that with those funds. But it doesn't at this time without having to eliminate other things. So we're looking at how we can repurpose some things. Good question.
Is the cap reduction based on business activities, like they just overestimated?
It's related to the state shortfall, right?
It's the Oregon Department of Ed, when they submitted their plan, they chose, because they have, within ODE, they get to choose. You know, we want to take this much from state school fund, aka the state shortfall line item, and they decided that the student investment account, which is funded by CAT, but it's not the reason. It's just one of the things that Oregon Department of Education said, we think we'd like to make a reduction here as opposed to other places. So part of their plan to submit to the legislature was reducing student investment account and high school success.
Yeah, and I think I'm asking the wrong. Corporate activities tax is codified, isn't it? Like, that's not so that 300,000, say, from the district isn't gonna be reused by the state in some other way because the state's not authorized to use in a different way, or is it?
I am not able to speak to the legality of that. I just know that that was in the presentation that Oregon Department of Education told us, this is what we submitted to CAT.
And there is a chunk of rainy day type funds for that account as well. So that's the other thing that makes all of this a bit tenuous, is all of this could change. But this is
Because
what,
Vaden has his hand up. He might have an answer.
Well, it's a thought, with the cat there. If the state's seeing reduced for income, they're probably thinking there's gonna be a reduced income from corporate taxes. Based on the layouts at Intel and other places, they're seeing lower sales, so it would make sense.
That makes sense.
Sorry, I'm sick, so I sound very froggy.
Thanks, me. Okay, so then if we look at more of the rest of this, we really are looking at needing to plan for some different tiers of reduction. So that first one, tier 1A with ODE on it. That column shows what ODE proposed last week. So we know we're still gonna have that $5 million of right sizing. With the proposal that they made, the impact to state school fund would only be $615,000 for Gresham-Barlow, so not the 3.1. That's what their proposal is. I included the money that is likely to be cut from the federal level, as well as the 2 grants at the bottom, although those shifted a little bit, I believe, this week as well. But ultimately, that tier 1A is a bit of a best case scenario if ODE gets their way and the legislature doesn't override them to do something different. The only difference in 1B is that second line in terms of the state shortfall, just to kind of start to build a range of what that might look like. When you start to get into tier 2 and to tier 3, Sean, to your point, the difference there is starting to add back in some scenario around ending fund balance. That would be a board's decision. But if we wanted to start to look at how do we start to build that back up, I just picked some numbers to start to illustrate what that could look like.
So can I ask a question about the right sizing?
Yeah.
Was that staff reductions that you made going into this year to right size, or is it that you're projecting for next year from this year?
It's that we're already over this year and we have some ways to kind of address some of that for this year, but we can't be over again next year. So we are gonna have to figure out how to offset that moving forward.
So potentially not rehiring, like, hiring for retirees.
It's
Could be.
Yeah,
There's a lot of things that we would have to consider, because these are pretty deep.
And it's really, if we underestimated the cost of PERS, we can't pretend like that didn't happen and that it might be better next year. We've got to account for that now and how we move forward. And maybe we'll get lucky at some point and guess right on. So the red circle there really is just that depending on what the board would decide around ending fund balance, I really would anticipate that the range of our reductions are between $7 and $10 million. As you start to look at that. And again, some of that's dependent on what the state and the legislature decides. Some of that's gonna be tied to federal money. Some of the federal money is really tricky because of the timing of when we actually know how much money we're gonna get from them. They're on a different fiscal year than we are. So that makes things complicated, so we're gonna need to plan for that.
The other unknowns too, that we keep being very unsettled about is, as they talk about the dismantling of the Department of Ed, will sped money come? If sped money doesn't come, that's another hole. If, as we start to look at jobless claims and getting caught up, and today's report was a mixed bag, and that was all the way back to September. Depending on how you look at today's report, it would be, we're at 4.4% unemployment, and apparently 4.5 is a benchmark that they worry about. So that would be that, we should look at lowering interest rates. So that's an economic perspective. But they had a double increase on what they estimated for jobs from 50,000 to 115,000. So others would look at it differently, say, we don't need an interest rate cut because we're still adding jobs, but not at the rate we used to. But that jobs report has a direct impact on Oregon and income and revenue at the state level. It's immediate. So we don't know what that's gonna be, and we're 2 months behind on getting those jobs reports. That,
The sped funding would be under the Title I, wouldn't it? No.
no,
That would be in addition to this.
yeah,
Oh, I thought.
it would be in addition.
Happy to look, it's like 11%, is that the state fund?
We get reimbursed for 11% of students with disabilities. Right now, we're at 15%. And it's a double weight, so when you talk about kids with very significant needs and outside placements at 150,000, and you only get 22,000 for that, that's a big challenge. And the sped reimbursement from the feds and the states has never covered our actual expenses. We cover out of the general fund about $10 to $15 million to cover our sped needs, and that comes directly out of gen ed classes.
I think, doesn't most of the sped dollars that we receive actually come from the state versus the federal
does.
dollars? So a reduction in sped federal dollars would be impactful, but it's not.
It really depends on the percentage that they're reimbursing to the state right now, and I know the promise in 1975 was the feds would reimburse 40% of our expenses. We've never gotten close to that. I think the highest we've ever gotten is 19 to 20% at the state level, and it's been as low as 7%. So.
I think the other thing, just the added layer of the state shortfall in that 1A and 1B. Is this perception across the state that K-12 education was the big winners from the last legislative session. And so there's a lot of competing interests around what actually plays out with the state decisions that will happen in February, which just adds to the uncertainty. But they're going into it with this thinking that we did well with what we were allocated last year. Okay, so this is where we were gonna take a break. But we did just take a break, so people are good moving forward, we can continue. We don't have a lot more, but you can kind of see, do you want to talk about what do we think this means for budget season? Talk about roles and responsibilities, get some feedback from you all in terms of some guiding principles and budget prioritization in terms of process. So we'll kind of, if we're good to go, we'll keep moving. And are there any other questions about some of the numbers before we move on?
I just had a question about, if a teacher earning a full package, let's say $150,000, and then they retire, what savings do we get from that teacher being on PERS opposed to being at FTP? Approximate.
Yeah, go ahead. So when we are looking at budgeting in the aggregate, because we're a fairly large district, we're the 10th largest in the state as far as enrollment goes. There's no clean way to know when any one person retires, who they're replaced by, and what's referred to in union parlance as the step schedule. So you could come in, you could have that teacher replaced by somebody who's already maxed out on that step schedule, in which case you have zero savings. You could have a brand new teacher come in which case there's significant savings, but that unknown factor is incredibly volatile and difficult to predict. But we're fortunate as a large district. This is the problem is magnified for us. We're a very small district, but because we're a large district, we do have some aggregate numbers to go off of, and those are part of the budget process every year. So we do anticipate overall attrition and replacement as part of the numbers that we are working with. So we are accounting for that, but that's a very valid point because that's potentially
As a school, you're looking to hire the most qualified, which is often somebody with experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And just overall, the last several years, our retirements have been pretty low. We haven't had a lot of retirement.
Is there, I mean, I'm thinking back to the 08 crisis when I was teaching here. And some of the ways to reduce some of these higher income teachers that are on the cusp of retirement was to offer like a retirement bonus or retirement incentive type thing. Are you guys starting to draft that type of, like, are we at that point drastic, or are we think we'll figure it out?
Well, you want to start?
Well, I'll just go back a little bit. It's a little bit different now than it was then, because before, and I'm not familiar exactly with their own district, but before often there was a cap of experience. So a district would say, we'll give you up to 10, or you could take it. Now that's not the case. We give you full. And so I think going back to what Pete said, it's really this unknown. You could incentivize someone to retire, but then
because there will be a lot of extra people out in the pool. We're already seeing it. We're getting lots of applicants. You could get someone who's very experienced, which you want, but when they come in, they may be at the same actual rate. And then now you're also paying retirement benefits for someone else as well. So it used to work out better because we used to have these kind of caps in there, but they changed that with, I think it's called work equity. So you have to give them whatever they've served anywhere else. And that wasn't the case previously. I think most districts previously topped it at 10. You could carry 10 on with you, and then you can start from there.
And Sean, we'll talk about this as we move through the next few slides. I mean, at this point, kind of everything's on the table. So we're gonna make a list, we're gonna start costing it out, we're gonna then prioritize it and see where it lands. We do feel like we're back in Great Recession times in terms of what this starts to look like. And one of the things that concerns me is at that point, we were able to get quite a bit of savings by changing the schedule at our high school. We went from a block schedule to a 7-period day. That was all about cost savings. We got that cost savings. We still have a 7-period day. We don't have another big move like that as we head into what we're facing this year. So everything, I mean, everything's on the table. Yep. Which kind of leads us to some of these next pieces. So I'm gonna keep going and then we can have more conversation. But, so this is why you're all here, budget committee. We're gonna start early and really start to just kind of help people start to understand the situation we face, might help you pay some attention to things that you see in the news and start to think about implications, start to open up conversation and communication with myself or with board members. But to just really start to be mindful and be very planful and intentional about how we move forward. And we are gonna focus on next year. At one point, we were worried about a mid-year reduction. We're less worried about that. So we're gonna be really focusing our efforts on building our budget for next year. This month, there's been communication with you all, with our labor groups, and there will be a community letter that goes out later this week, just kind of announcing that there's a challenge ahead. In January, I'm anticipating that we're gonna wanna get back together and have some more conversation. We'll start working on some community engagement processes. And in the meantime, really what's not on there is our district level leadership are starting the list and starting to cost things out just to start to see what does this even start to look like, what's even possible. So it kind of gives you a sense of what are the things that might happen before the short session of the legislature, which starts in February. And then, as you know, our more standard kind of practice budget season is up there in terms of budget 101 starting in March. April tends to be when we're really digging into proposals. And by the end of June, we have an approved budget in place. So just thinking about roles and responsibilities. So for district staff and superintendent, communications, really thinking about the process and goals, but that's part of what we want feedback from you on today. We'll be looking at those programmatic decisions and really thinking about the line item budget and where we might be able to find some savings. Budget committee really is focused on providing feedback and input into the process and goals. So some of that will start tonight, but also function level budget allocations and advisement to the board. The board's responsibility is to really look at all of that feedback. One of the key decisions for the board will really be around that ending fund balance and what that starts to look like. And again, the appropriations are at that function level budget. And I'll show you in a minute what that means. And then, do you want to talk about the chart?
Sure. For those of you who have served on previous years of a budget making process, you may be familiar with this page. But I think what sometimes gets lost in larger conversations about the budget is this is the only legal page that the board approves. There's, as you all have read through, over 100 pages of budget documentation, but that's the only one that carries legal weight. So it is really important, especially in that kind of mini budget 101 focus that I was talking about, bringing us all back together in this is really highlighting that level of what is the board actually appropriating and saying, and what are those function levels? And we'll go into a little bit more of that. Those function levels, by the way, and that's a legal term, by Department of Revenue, function are things such as, if we want to go to the next page. Oh, sorry, that's another page now.
Here, I'll go there.
Oh, okay. Our instruction, support, community service, facilities acquisition, transfers out, contingency. That's the level of appropriations. And what this messy chart is trying to communicate is that the board on the left, that's the level of appropriation. On the right, district leadership has to translate that into all the different things that are a little bit more granular. Staffing, overtime, PERS, transportation, insurance, rentals, everything. And it's, if you can imagine this as like a two-dimensional thing, turn it three-dimensional and then plot it against every single program, every single school, every single district director. So there's a dimensionality to this. There's a lot, and that's why the budget document you get is over 100 pages for exactly that reason. And if we go back, and I apologize for going out of order there, it's important to remember that as a governing body and as somebody who speaks finance to y'all in the future, it's just important to remember that almost always we're talking about general fund because we as an entity have control over general funds. We have these other funds. We have the general fund, which is unrestricted fund, which can be spent within appropriation levels set by the board without approval from other entities. Special revenue funds, by contrast, are very restricted to specific types of expenditures by grants, by signed contracts with the federal government, with the state government, with granting institutions. And then there's other legal things that come into play with like student body funds can only be used for specific things that benefit students. Nutrition services only be used in very specific areas. So there's all these like restrictions for special revenue fund. And we don't have control over that revenue that comes from grants. So we apply and we see what we get. Debt service, the bond was passed. Now there's debt service. So that's contractual. There's nothing really to make a decision other than we need to continue paying our debt. And capital projects is very restricted to non-operational capital projects, such as building projects, capital equipment purchases, those things that have been talked about in the past. But our capital projects fund, as you've seen in previous budget cycles, is not exactly brimming. So I just wanted to give that basic overview of like, that's why we talk about general fund and not so much those others, because the general fund is the one where there's say, where there's agency.
Can you go back one slide? Can any of these services be pushed to the city or the county, or, I mean, can we look ahead the head? Can we like say, well, this should go to you guys because of this, or?
If, you know, we had a massive amount of political will to change, you know, major things at the legislative level, that may be possible, but that's something that in my short 10-year career in districts, I haven't seen happen. John would be able to speak to that more than me.
I mean, he's correct. This is legislated. This is our responsibility. We can't push it off on another entity. And all the other state entities are experiencing shortfall.
All of the right column saying is legally required.
If I'm not looking at exhaustive, like if you start off licensed, classified, admin,
Yeah.
overtime, that's all of ours. PERS, that's our responsibility too. Social Security, that's legislated, at the federal level. All those leaves, and then tuition reimbursements, that's contract, that's ours. So the leaves are mandated by state level. If you work down into instructional services, that's us. Transportation, we have to get kids to school, that's the law. District insurance, we have to carry insurance, and that goes up about 15 to 16% a year. Repair and maintenance is all ours. Rentals when we need to, that's our copy machine, that's other things like that, that's us. Fuel, we have to put fuel in the buses, that's our responsibility. We have to be audited, we have to have legal services, that's our responsibility, it's not on anybody else. Same with supplies, textbooks, our curriculum, food service, we need to feed it to kids. Software and computer hardware, none of that can be pushed anywhere else, it's our responsibility.
Yeah, I appreciate
Heather's question.
Yeah, on the point that we have demanded more and more and more of education to solve society's problems.
Agreed.
And I think that's, I'm completely jumping over the boat here, but I think that's what. A little bit of the spirit of what you're getting at is we're asked to do more in education. Than ever before.
Tracy said that kind of earlier, and you are correct, and Heather, if that's the direction you're going, you are correct as well. The amount of things that we have to do to support students and families that we didn't have to do 30 years ago is a drain, but a necessary one, so I don't want that to come across as negative, but it is a challenge. There are, at the last time I looked, there's almost 14 pages of unfunded mandates from the state that we have to comply with.
So
All of
part,
that is a challenge.
part of what you're gonna see as we get through a few more slides are some questions that with each line item of things that are a maybe to cut. We will have a list of questions where we vet each thing. The first question we're asking to help sort things is this required? And we have had conversations that we are not even sure if we can meet all of the what is required based on the scenarios that were presented. And as a board, you know, we present Division 22. That's our compliance with the state. We have to do that annually. There could be scenarios where we decide that we cannot be compliant in something. And then maybe we fix that the next year and we're not compliant in something else. I don't know, but like there is a scenario where we start to not be compliant with some of the requirements that we're being asked to provide, given our scenario. One of the questions I've already heard floated around is related to that unfunded mandate of personal finance and career pathways. Some districts have implemented, some have not. We asked for a year waiver, so that's why we haven't started yet. And so, are they gonna hold us to these requirements?
And unfortunately, if we were a fire district, budget committee and board, or a city, we'd be hearing the exact same questions and the exact same issues.
Yeah.
There aren't any of them that are flush. And able to take over.
One of them's loaded. That's all.
And I think the spirit of this slide, and maybe I'm wrong, so correct me, is that as tempting as it is for us to get in the weeds of suggestions and stuff like that, and look at the line items and, hey, can we cut this here and add here? That is not in our purview. Our purview is the big numbers. It's the final number of all of these little things added together. So it's the big instruction budget number. It's the big support. Where we come in is, hey, can we maybe reduce instruction to increase support versus the specific items? And so I think that's kind of with the spirit of the slide.
That is 100% correct. And I like to refer to these functions as super buckets. These super buckets of money that I have to slip that in where again. Super buckets of money where we have to maintain some flexibility to be responsive also to the different things that happen throughout a year. And so that's part of the why behind that is our ability to be responsive within some guidelines and some rules. But that's also kind of part of what leads us to this next part of the conversation, where we do want some input on some of the guiding principles that we've created for ourselves, so that we're not making emotional decisions in the moment about a pet project, right? As opposed to having some principles that we lean back to every time to help guide our decision making. And so that is where we can get feedback, and that is part of how you are involved in some of that other layer of the weeds, as you described.
Question about the last slide again.
Yeah.
Is there significance to the colors?
I was just trying to point out how much, again, is payroll driven versus.
Oh, okay, so the pinkish is the payroll related.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Great question.
Spreadsheet people speak the same thing.
I'm just a wannabe spreadsheet person.
So am I, but you know what? I keep my spreadsheet people close. If you need them.
When I'm in a meeting and I get a nod from Pete, I'm like. There's a lot. All right, so what we started to do, so a lot of what we're doing this year is kind of updating our process from last year. And so last year we had some guiding principles. You all weren't really involved in that because we were working in a much quicker timeline and didn't have the gift of time that we have this year. So what we've drafted are 5 guiding principles for our cabinet and district leadership team around financial goals. And this is where we would like, you know, to have some conversation. Can everybody see it okay, or do you want me to read it? I know it's,
Just give a chance to.
just give
read
you a
up.
minute to read it and then we'll see if you have questions. Questions, thoughts? What do you mean by this? Kind of wonderings?
If it's our fiscal stability equals, what'd you say, $680,000 a day? So in essence, our fiscal stability really means if everything turned off, we'd have 1 month.
Oh,
So,
good question.
Sort of.
you know, granted, you're working within a constrained environment that it's not like we have a lot of other options. So, okay.
And I think where there's no, I think where there's some, conversation for the board is the 8% is a newer limit. It had been 5% for many years. 8% is well within the range of very typical across districts. But I think that's where there's conversation to be had in terms of like, how fast does that have to happen? What does that look like over time? In terms of that piece.
And to go historical on your question, and I could be wrong here too. Back in the 08 crisis, we, in money in the bank, we had, instead of a month and a half, we had
1 day.
1 day.
Yeah.
So we're doing pretty well.
Oh, no,
compared to-
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
no, by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it behooves us to. You know, as we get to that, I think how long is that runway might be relevant. I haven't heard. To the limited extent the stock market makes any kind of sense to me, that this does sort of look and have some indicators like that 08 thing, and so. If where we were in 08 got us down to a day, this might not be right.
Well, part of that is, we did get down to a day, but part of that was the recession piece and how much money we had to give back to the state to stay solvent.
Yeah.
We're not in that same position here.
The state's in a different place too in terms of rainy day funds.
Right.
But lots of questions about what that actually means.
Yeah, it was kind of the broader question of, you know, from the reserve number to be viewed. Not just as a luxury, but a like preventative measure against a mid-year cut. If the state has to make a last ditch turn, even if it's not nearly as significant, all of a sudden we find ourselves, oh, we have a 2% minimum, oh crap, now it's making
Right.
cuts. Yeah, that's where the value of pushing that back up.
Absolutely.
And I think that maybe when we get to the more budget 101, we might need to talk about contingency related to that ending fund balance, because we may choose to put a little more contingency, and I've read that, you know, at it by reducing the ending fund balance, knowing that it's there to prevent some of that or give us some agility. Depending on when these assumptions start to come into view.
I think part of with the ending fund balance, because I was there in 2008, is, it's a number to aspire to. So that we have the flexibility when things crash. And then the part that makes me rest easier is, what are we going to do to restore it to that? And have at least as much as we can plan. Or at the very least, a commitment that we will restore it to that, however we get there. But it's not just well, we're gonna do it and then whatever happens later. And I don't think we would do that. I don't think that we're part of that, but part of putting that in there and putting it in as a firm number was so that we have a place to have a conversation.
When I think the ending fund balance, you guys are all glomming onto the right thing right now too, because heaven forbid we also add a recession onto this in the next 12 months. Because that does change this picture substantially.
Well, we weren't gonna get there until Nick put it out in the open.
You're welcome.
You don't talk about a recession, it doesn't happen.
Sorry.
Now you're mentioned 5 times.
Yeah.
Hasn't Oregon already crossed into recession?
Say it again?
My understanding is Oregon and 21 other states have already crossed into a recession state.
Yeah, we heard from an economist a month ago that basically said that, yes.
And as far as the big buckets, right, does this committee, does this board have say over the ending fund balance, or is that in your?
No, that's yours.
That's
yours.
So we would need to review that policy, and I think we probably need to bring that to the table soon.
Yeah.
And we could pull back out what we presented in
March.
March as kind of what we thought was gonna happen with then now new reality.
And I would say, like, in maybe before the end of tonight, it'd be nice to hear from those members who are here, what your thoughts are on that ending fund balance, as we do start to look at that policy, what kinds of controls and measures, maybe that's what you're getting at, what kind of a runway would we want to talk about, or, I think I'd certainly be all ears to the budget committee to help us craft and review that policy. I want to add one more kind of wrinkle into this because one key distinction between 08 and a worst case scenario here is that in 08 we were on an incline, an increasing enrollment. And here we're in declining enrollment where families have more choices than they've ever had. And I think one sort of unrehearsed principle that I'd float out there is we need to be very conscious about the reasons why families are choosing public school right now. As we look at what programs and evaluate their effectiveness. We could cut this thing to the bone and accelerate or make our declining enrollment picture look much worse and ultimately spiral. And I think we need to be very conscious about what programs we evaluate here.
And I agree, and I think we have to look at like, what is the community, employers, businesses needing it, so that's where I get a little sketchy, like for personally. I would not be in favor of cutting the CTE, trains programs, because it's preparing our kids and helping the community, and that's one of the reasons I think families are glomming on, because private schools don't offer trades.
I think that's gonna be one of the things, so I guess the good news related to that specifically is Measure 98, right? We have Measure 98, we have Perkins dollars, which are grants that are specifically for those types of programs and can't be used for other stuff. So there's going to be things that are held on to, partially because of grant funding and the funding is protected. Well, then there's other things, and there's gonna be moments where those things don't make sense when you're still keeping these things. And so that's gonna be a big piece of educating people and really trying to be strong communicators about how, what can be used for what. We've gotten really good with some of our restricted funds in terms of really understanding how different pieces of money can be used strategically. But it's going to be confusing to people, and how some of those things do get saved and other things don't.
I think if you roll it out, just how you just explained it, saying this came from grant money, it has to be spent with this, that would make the visibility a lot clearer.
That's also where you all can help, right? Like, because I'm not gonna probably have a touch point with everybody, but if I can help get you all educated on some of that and you can help with some of that conversation, or at least just enough to satisfy the questions, then that can be part of the strategy too, in terms of community, communication.
I think the other thing, interesting, way here tonight, there was a piece that this declining enrollment is not unique to this area or Oregon. It's a nationwide issue.
Mhm.
Do we, not for this budget, we need to do it that quickly, but do we start thinking about which schools we have to close? Do we just can't afford to leave them open?
And I was kind of thinking that too, when I saw that graph.
Which ties in directly to your previous discussion.
Yep.
Of how much money do we spend?
We bumped into that discussion in the long range facilities chat, so I think I would say, I feel like the district leadership they got it on their radar.
Okay.
And many districts, that's what they're gonna have to do for next year. Like I have heard from many districts that are already engaging in that process. We might be in that spot had we not already closed Damascus and West Gresham, right? We've already closed 2. So that could be part of our future.
One thing to maybe kind of half bits on there is I feel like it might be valuable for, and like it's incredibly complex, what things caused the hole? Sort of on a direct, like if we said federal tax policy changes resulted in a hole. It's not even,
Yeah.
but like HR1, big beautiful bill did like this legislative change did this, and it's not the district taking a stance on that, it's being completely transparent with, like, we're doing the best we can with the cards we get. Some of you are involved in the cards we just got, and you may wanna look in a mirror, however, now we're trying to play the deck we got, and that's what we're doing. But I think it helps connect the dots of this thing you heard about over there does actually impact what we're now navigating, and being as direct as possible. And again, I know it's complex, but like that thing did this, or Title I covers this, and that's where it's, like also connecting what that program does would really help.
It's almost like we need a teacher to create that,
Could be.
that idea and connect.
Well,
the
that's the
dots.
personal finance, no, I'm just kidding.
No, it's, well, no, it's not, that's not, I was like, you need to explain that, like you said, I love that idea. We need the community to connect the dots. This is why we're here, because the decisions and the votes that other people have made.
I was just gonna blame Joe.
Well, I was like, this might go too new for a
If I
while.
Well, if I could jump in, and this is not the PERS shortfall is also a frame of reference, because we serve a business community and we serve people who are in personal finance, like just, we all understand budgets. But civic budgets are different. They're supposed to be a worst case scenario, but at the same time that you're preparing for a worst case scenario with your budget, you're trying to thread a needle and not cut programs that matter to people. Here, that the 4.7, particularly the 3.6, the PERS part of it, was threading a needle to sustain programs. And we missed the needle a little bit. All of us approved that budget with the information that we had, which was the left side of that chart that Pete showed, that didn't double, it isn't budgeting a project for work. It's different. And I've been here for 9 years. That's a heavy lift to ask somebody else to understand. But I think tying, here's how we got to here. But just to put a bow on my thought is, if we say, here's the problem that got us here, and we're gonna treat it the same as 08, we're gonna dice up our music programs, and we're gonna only go to the bare bone, I think we're gonna perpetuate the problem that we're in at a local level. And that is something we do control, are those choices that we make.
Well, and part of, if we put together the right education program is reverse as this may sound, we may be able to encourage a local option levy to cover some of these issues if we do the proper education.
Yeah. on the state level, I've been in some conversations lately, and I'm sure some of you have too, but. Oregon's suffering on the economic development side, struggling big time. And our funding formulas and our CAT. Insists on a business environment that we just have not seen prosperous in our state. And I think at the end of this road, as well as maybe some advocacy opportunities for us as a board to get a very big picture, and budget committee and community. Gresham does some things really well. We talked about it in the long range facilities plan. We've done some things really well because we've kind of been about the bedrock stuff of what we're supposed to provide to the community. And I don't think that's always been necessarily true at the state level, because everybody's got a good idea for what people should have. I think there's some advocacy here too that's gonna take a lot of information. We're probably gonna demand a whole lot of keep making us smarter and trying to make us smarter.
I think advocacy is gonna be key. There are some things that have surfaced in the last couple of weeks around funding formulas, around poverty numbers. I don't know if you've seen those articles in the Oregonian, but it kind of makes you go, wonder what this is all about. So there's so many moving parts, and we met with union leadership yesterday, and part of it is we have to be in this together. We can't be pitting ourselves against each other. We have to kind of unite hands and figure out how to move forward the best that we can, but together. But I think advocacy is gonna have to be part of it.
Yeah, sorry, I will shut up soon enough, but I feel like. What tends to happen is OSBA or COSA, the advocacy means ask for more revenue from the state. And I think our advocacy probably, to be practical and effective for that long range view. For the sake of our community, has to be something different. It has to be looking at those District 22 requirements and saying, is this still pertinent to a 21st century student? I think we'll lean on the district to help us identify where those things are that maybe aren't serving our kids, but we're required to do anyway.
And there's some broader understanding that we need to build at the state level also in terms of the Greshams of the world, because even when I sit alongside other superintendents in our county, Gresham is second largest to Portland, but we are like the district besides Corbett that doesn't get any funding from anything the city of Portland does. So even our neighbors in Reynolds and our neighbors in Centennial and David Douglas and Park Rose, as an example, you mentioned music. They get part of that beautiful city art tax, and that funds their music teachers. We don't have anything like that that helps supplement what we get. So we truly are living on bare bones with no levy, with no big city that's making something else happen, right? We really are like scraping to get by. And not a lot of people really understand that, but that's a piece of where Gresham suffers a bit. We kind of get forgotten about with the county at times as well, and those things all start to have an impact for us.
I think it's a good point. I would maybe suggest it's almost, I think the perception might be, well, Portland overtax, over revenue. So saying like we're left out might create the image of, no, your guys are fine. They're over.
Totally fair.
As opposed to
Yep.
the way and I'm with you on, we want I think there's
Yep.
probably a levy, but anyway, yes, but that point might go the other way.
Okay, I have a couple more guiding principles. We also wanted to be thinking about non-financial principles as well. We really want to be thinking about our communication and how we are educating our community about all the things that are going on. And with that, we honestly need some grace, because it changes week to week to week, and it's going to change multiple times. And we need to make sure that people understand that. I'm gonna show you a decision-making tool that we have that really thinks about our student needs as a part of this process. So you'll see that in a minute. And then the last one there is, we have to be super caretakers of any of our staff that are impacted by layoffs or risk. And so that is there to hold our cabinet and district staff accountable to making sure we're being really intentional about how we take care of people that might be losing jobs, transferring, whatever it might be. Or programs that might be impacted, so we want something there that is holding us accountable to that, the very best. So those are our non-financial guiding principles. And then these are the questions. So last year we used some really similar questions in terms of vetting different items that we were considering for reduction. We've made a few updates this time around.
I'm curious about number 6, like, are you going to send out a survey to the community this time around to determine what these values are?
We're working on what that might look like. So whether it's a survey, whether it's some kind of community engagement. And then that is the way that we pull that engagement back into our decision making. That's exactly right. And number 4 is new. Number 4 wasn't on the list last year because we weren't going to be cutting at a level that might put us at risk with safety or legally. And some of our other operational responsibilities. So we want to pause and think about those things too. Any questions about those questions or anything that seems to be missing?
Is this our last opportunity
To look at these?
yeah,
I mean, you have a little time to chew on them, but what I will say is right after Thanksgiving break, cabinet, on Monday, we're starting the list. We're starting the list and these are the questions as we start to get a list of items that we'll consider for reduction and start to cost them out. Then once we have that list, we use these questions to help us decide kind of priorities and help assign them to those tiers. So is this one of the first things to go? Is this one of the last things to go? So we need these more solidified sooner than later. Yeah. And honestly, as you're using them, sometimes we're also like, wait, we need another little question about this, because as you're using a tool like this, you have to adjust a little bit.
Can you send us a copy of the PowerPoint?
Yeah, oh yeah. it'll be
Some of
part
us
it.
don't read very well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would just supplement one, is this a requirement? And is the only reason we would sustain this because it's a requirement? If we were choosing for our kids, would we keep it?
And like, I really appreciate that because that makes me feel like if we're not meeting a requirement, or if we intentionally decide together to not meet a requirement, that we have the grace to think about our kids, right, first, and not just what the rules are.
This is one of
As a new superintendent, that's a little bit scary to think that you're not meeting some of the requirements, but I appreciate that.
Well, because I mean, ultimately, the worst case they could do is come up with a plan to meet it in the future, right?
Yeah.
And so to me, kids come first. Requirements come second.
There are some fiscal requirements.
Yes, I'm
that-
sure
that
there's some that are like,
They will cut off your funding for the
Yeah.
next month. Sure.
but let's look at.
Outside of those,
yeah.
But I'm sure there's a lot of those like.
I would be happy to.
Just shot us to go,
Like it's all else.
and what Tracy said, just to put things in perspective too. Bringing you all in early is a big signal. The fact that we're talking about not reporting openly that we're not able to meet requirements is significant. It should send a signal to the community, to everybody else. These are deep cuts that we're considering, and it's gonna be really hard. And I do have confidence in this group. I've watched you operate. I know you will give us good advice that we can use. I also worry about going to a community, getting input and knowing we still may not be able to do what they want because it's deep, because that sends a message too. So getting your input, valuing that input is going to be important for us too. I have every confidence in Tracy and Cabinet and how we've been operating so far as well, and we'll get through this. But make no mistake, this is gonna be a very difficult time going into the spring.
The board set that condition of belonging and I would just encourage the district to really get some data about what programs are bringing belonging to our kids that are keeping them coming back. Those are the ones we cherish, the ones that keep our kids in school and get them to the finish line.
Any other questions or thoughts or feedback, we absolutely will send it out. John, and if anyone has questions, send them my way and we'll,
I do have a couple questions not related to this, if we're done with this part of it.
yeah.
So I work for Oregon Health Sciences University, and one of the things that we don't allow at OHSU is working back when you retire from PERS. One, is there a cost to the district for hiring somebody back that makes that more expensive? And two, how many people do we have working back who are officially retirees?
And give those numbers right now, but we can get those numbers to you.
Okay, I appreciate it. My second question comes from the first hour of your presentation. I noticed that it looks like Hall Elementary is what, 55% occupancy right now? Is that about right? Okay. And we have other school, it doesn't look like most of the schools are nearing occupancy. At what point with our budget do we look at closing a physical building to move its teachers to another building, so we aren't paying for the heating, electricity usage, all that type of things?
Yeah, I think that will be something that we have to consider, if not for next year, for the next biennium where these challenges will continue.
Yeah, it's hard to, keep every building open, and Portland Public's having that same problem. They don't have enough students for the schools they have.
Yeah.
I think my other feedback for a bunch of things would just be and it's a needle to thread in about 85 different ways. It's the communication of, and I don't have an answer, so this is kind of a pointing at a problem. How transparent to be with the, for lack of a better term, the list. Like, you want, to a certain extent, folks to see it in advance and go, yeah, that stinks, the line fell at 7, but I'm happy with where number 8 is, and that might stink for somebody, but okay, I understand. Versus, man, that's gonna create a lot of heat and a lot of crappy meetings, to do something that transparent. So, but I think if somebody wakes up one day and finds out their program's gone and they never had a chance to talk about it, that's gonna feel bad too. So again, good luck, guys.
Yeah. Well, one thing, it was emotionally hard, but one thing that has been going through my mind that we had to do as the OA, and I think you all remember, is we had the list. And each staff member had to go through the list, and maybe there was even dollar amounts associated with it, like you had a certain amount of dollars and you had to create your list of the programs that you keep, and you can go over the budget amount or something like that. I mean, hopefully we're not there, but that could be a method of notifying people, here's the possible cuts. What can we do to keep your program? What other cuts would we have to make in order to keep it?
And I think it's hard, but having people have the opportunity to argue for their program, even if it might be kind of hopeless, I think there's some value in that, but it's a lot for you guys.
Well, the board has the easy, I don't think blame it on us.
Right, the budget committee said. You may look at them, but those are crap.
But I do think that that's also where a survey can come into play, right? Where if we can gather some feedback about people's priorities and utilize that as part of our tool, part of our decision making, that's one layer of that. And we have talked about, how do we help people understand the why behind some of the things that are having to happen, as best we can. And I think the other challenge is if we're in the spirit of saving something, then people need to be identifying, then what is the thing that you're trading that for?
Yeah.
And, because I think that's what makes saving something harder, when then I'm like, well, I can't just save it to save it. I have to save it and get rid of something else, helps, I think, illustrate the challenges in some of the decision making that has to happen.
That's where the list idea kind of comes in, it's just, it's
Yeah.
painful, and the phrase I use is, we can do anything, we can't do everything. So it really is like you have to pick which thing.
And the why is important too.
Given the level of uncertainty kind of with the process, is there a time frame that we are looking to communicate?
We have some contractual timelines. And I mean, I don't know yet. We've kind of started backwards mapping a bit. We did some of that last year. I'm really concerned about how we find this level of cuts. And so I think we will know more once we've started really digging in to see what savings we think we can find. I say that because we cut $8 million of the easy stuff. Last year was the easy stuff, right? Air quotes. And it wasn't easy and we're still struggling. And so I know that the next level is going to be really painful.
We are sending a letter to Tracy, sending a letter for staff tomorrow. So that'll start.
And families.
And family, pardon me, so that it'll start tomorrow. And then we'll work more as a cabinet for sure to figure out how that engagement goes. When you go back to 08, some of the feedback we got, and it was angry feedback, was I'm in a room with somebody, I'm telling them I'm gonna cut their program and I wanna keep mine. And there were so many hard feelings. As administrators, we walked out of that going, I never wanna do that again. I'd rather have people target me than staff targeting each other because it was so angry. And that was a motion topic then. And it's hard for an administrator to just make those decisions, but it was a hard time.
Taking your question in a little different direction, so they talked about, I think it was on a slide, January, February, bringing this group back. But I have a question, is that sufficient? I mean, I think these are helpful, but, I know I would personally like to provide the opportunity and get your feedback about the policy when the board reviews that. I'm wondering if that's something the board's amenable to that, and I'd love to invite this group to kind of reconvene, and so that at least we can get your feedback in that policy review time, so. Okay.
A January work session or February retreat.
Yeah, let's talk,
Yeah.
Tracy, and maybe it's assumed in some of these, since you flip back to this page again. Where is student input gathered?
Part of the community process. We've talked about students and what that too.
Okay.
Like,
Cause I guess when I heard community, I was thinking the broader community, and so I just wanted to make sure how we narrow it down to those that we're serving. Where are we getting there, and combination of their input and also awareness for them that this isn't done in a vacuum, that there are a lot of conversations going on with it, and that it's not gonna be pretty.
Yeah.
No matter what we do.
one of the things we've talked about is how to involve our district equity committee, and Rosta's on that committee as well. We have 5 students on that committee who are more used to working with some district level leaders around different topics. And I think that will be an important group for us to involve. But then what they can help, like, so then what does that look like in a high school? What does that start to look like, from there? We're talking about how to utilize some of the.
Because there'll be some of the ones that will go home and tell their parents, this is what's gonna happen to me.
Yeah.
And so I want them as much as we can to have the information so that we don't create little pockets of firestorms that more information. Would be helpful.
I think another thing, a scenario that we need to come up with is, here's our cuts. Maybe even as we develop the budget, here's our budget, our reduced budget. But, and unfortunately, we won't know this until middle of March when the session is over. It could very well be that Oregon takes the stance of decoupling themselves from federal law, which then would create more income, and so it could be this is a moot point. What I would like to see is here's our deep cuts, here's our add backs. And then and what are the trigger point, well, probably not the best word, but what are the points at which we say, okay, well, we're adding this back because we have the surplus income, okay, we're adding this back. So that way it's in organized fashion, because I could very well see that we make all of these cuts. But then the reality on the ground is gonna be a whole different thing.
I think that's where us having tiers of reductions helps with that, because then you can start with then this tier is what we're gonna look at putting back. And you've gone through some kind of prioritization to get there, so I think that can help if that's the scenario. I will say that what I've heard is that the initial steps in terms of decoupling have failed.
Look at that this week, interesting.
Does everybody
Whatever those
understand,
first steps are,
I don't know what
I've
those are,
heard the
yeah.
first steps.
does everybody understand the decoupling and coupling and why there's a revenue piece? in Oregon?
I haven't heard that.
So, we're one of 5 states to where, and I'm just getting up to speed on this, so I may be a little wrong, people correct me, we're one of 5 states that Oregon, so you do your federal taxes, you find out what your taxable income is, and that's where you start in Oregon. So then you take Oregon's deductions and you end up paying less income tax in Oregon, because we're directly connected to that federal income tax rate. 45 other states just start at the same level, at the state level in here, which is why those 45 other states tend to have more revenue than we do. So the talk about decoupling, which hasn't gotten traction from what we've heard, was something that came up immediately.
Well, it's related to the federal tax policy changes, like not taxing tips.
Right.
And not, like, it's all of those decisions, federal level, Oregon is tied to those decisions.
Okay.
Been dumb for 30+ years, it's gonna continue to be dumb. We really do need to uncouple.
Let's talk about the clicker.
Yeah, those two things hit my inbox at the same time. School circle, here's your kicker.
Yeah, exactly.
I also got Prov makes money and Prov cutting due to lot not getting money, those are at the same time too, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah. All right, well, I think that probably concludes this conversation for tonight. And again, as you have thoughts, or if you're dreaming about this at night like I am, and you want to send me an email, please do. And then Blake and I will be working together for kind of the next time to bring you all back. But I really appreciate you being here and diving into this alongside us, so we can figure it out.
Thank you all. Big thanks for joining too. Hope you
You're
feel
thank
better.
you. Have a good evening, everybody.
All right, well, I think we'll take a 5-minute recess. And then we can jump back into our agenda. Yeah, so you're welcome to stay. You're not personal.
so I have to say that again.
All right, we're gonna reconvene on this November 20 work session.
I don't believe it.
Our next item, we're into our action items. We have a first reading for some policy reviews. So John.
Thank you, Chair. I had all this up here. We have, is it four tonight? I can't remember. Sean's gonna take the lead on some of them because he has better memory and some of them more complex as we get answer questions. But the first one we have right now is BB. Do you need to display?
Hang on, David, can you hear? David, can you hear us? Okay.
First one is BBFC, and that's reporting of child abuse, and this really was a cleanup of language. It wasn't anything substantive. It matches what we already do. We have to make child abuse reports. So the board, the policy committee got to it pretty quickly and brought it forward to today. If you have any questions, now's the time to ask, but it's pretty straightforward.
At some point, John, I'd like to have, just a little bit more, because we've gone through the presentation, we've all had to do the training stuff. But, just some clarification on, as a situation that occurred recently that was in public, in a parking lot, that was not at a school. I'm a mandatory reporter.
Yes.
And so just a little bit of, little practice on running through a scenario with that, because it was a little uncomfortable, but
Happy to.
I wasn't gonna walk away.
Yeah, happy to.
Okay.
And we've all said we've been there at one point or another.
Mm-hmm.
The next policy is BHD. The board has had substantive conversations. It's getting late about this. These are, there are some pretty significant adjustments here. If you look under the title board member stipends, reimbursements, the title change, that's all just clarification language, that first piece. That first paragraph is all new, a change, and it changes how you would vote on this. Who could one board member versus another get a stipend? So there's some substantive discussion that you may want to have, but it's a pretty big change. So I will give you an opportunity to read that first paragraph.
So I think for some history, we have not been paid. There was a state law that passed that we could get paid, but then there was some concerns over conflict of interest and stuff like that. And so if we choose to adopt this, we are saying there's the potential to get paid, and this is how we do it. Now, with that explanation, I'm one member of this board. And my personal opinion is I would like to keep policy as is and not do the stipend. But that's just my one member's point of view. I'm not going to overtake and say this is the way it must be, which is why I brought it forward to get discussion.
And I look at it on the other side, that I would like to have a clean policy in place that allows for choice. That if a board member would like to take the policy, that it's laid out how that would work and how that would be done in a way that does not create a conflict of interest. I know that we've had conversation about this many times when they've tried to get this in place. And it is, it's a little bit discouraging that we are elected officials and we are the only elected officials that are not paid. And when you look at legislators, when you look at every other city council, various groups, they all are valued for the time and effort that they do to give to the job that they have been elected to do. And this isn't even enough to cover the amount of time and effort that we do, but having the option, if you don't want it, that's fabulous. Right now, we just had a long conversation about budget, It doesn't mean that we're going to automatically take this, but I would like for there to be in policy a straightforward way that says, if you would like to do it, if this is a burden on you being able to participate, that there should be a stipend. And that's my take on this, is that with the way that they're trying to make this so that we aren't in, a conflict of interest scenario. And then if you choose not to have it, then that's fine. But I would be in favor of having the policy be in place so that we can actually take action on it and have board members decide if they want to have the stipend or not.
Is anybody able to kind of bring me up to speed on the law side of it? So this was introduced by Rep. Bynum, I believe. And then immediately fell into some legal limbo. It was like $500 a month, retroactively payable at the time, and then it went into the legal challenge. I don't even know where the law stands at this point, so.
It's still 500, but it's been prorated, like Portland takes 517 a month or something, don't quote me on the exact amount, but. You know, and so yes, there is a set maximum that can be paid out, you know, it was 500 based on, what was it, 3 or 4 years ago? But then it's COLA or whatever, you know, there's some sort of like kicker to increase the maximum each year.
If I'm reading the first paragraph correctly, and again, correct me if I'm wrong. The board still has to vote whether they're gonna do it or not, and then individual board
Right.
members have the choice.
Right.
And
And
that's,
it doesn't affect your actual expenses. So for instance, going to a conference and you have to pay for airfare or parking or mileage, you can get reimbursed for an actual expense. So this doesn't affect that. This is not part of, if you take the stipend, you're not giving them, being able to request your expenses that you pay.
and I think. Part of, I mean. To be fair, I've got lots of opinions. Right, and. So one of my opinions on this particular issue is, we are literally having a discussion about cuts and to create and pass a policy about even the potential of a stipend doesn't look good to the community. You know, and so that's, I won't say more, but that's kind of.
I was gonna clarify, I was like, cause this would be coming out of district budget, correct?
Which is why they give you an option to take it or not. And we have had this conversation ongoing for a couple of years. And yes, we did just have a conversation about budget. Doesn't mean that you have to take the stipend, but it's just cleaning up the policy now that they've also cleaned up some of the law and gotten the clarification on how to make sure that you're not in a conflict of interest in doing this. And as far as voting on it to start with, and starting with the resolution, so.
The conflict of interest is kind of hilarious because didn't the same legislative core also just push a measure onto taxpayers that took away independent, so they get to determine their own pay? Don't legislators determine their own pay?
Possible, I think they didn't follow that.
Okay, so help me understand. So our options here, we've got a policy and then we would need to approve a rate. If this policy moved forward and were passed, we would still need to approve a rate.
That is my understanding of the policy, yes.
And the maximum is $500.
Right, and that
So
is
that's
still in
dictated by
statute,
law.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's still in statute.
But also as a board unified, we could just say it's here, but. Like, that's not something we're doing,
Yeah.
is that?
And
or
I
is it
think, so
individual?
I think this is, we have a few different options, right?
Mhm.
And so the first option is to leave it as is. We're telling the community, hey, we're not even like putting this optics out there. The second option is. We approve this policy and we don't even take a vote on it but it's in policy, but there is some of that optics of, well, they could get paid. And then there's the third, which is we pass this and then we pass some amount. that a board member could get paid. And I think Portland Public just voted, it was a little over 500
I
because.
think you're right on the 517.
So it was like 570.
Yeah.
So that's kind of our three scenario options. My scenario option I would like to see is scenario one, let's just maybe push this off for another year when we're not in a fiscal crisis. But
This is not a required policy. We got to the highly recommended and recommended that we could take it back policy committee and we could review it.
Well, I think for Heather and Brenna, we haven't looked at very many policies, so anything in gray is a new addition. And anything that's white was already there, so the white stuff would still, like, that's the existing policy.
And the purple is the, like, taking. it
Some
out.
recommended, yeah.
Yeah, and then the green
Just added.
added.
And if, when it's in brackets, that's optional, whether we take it or not, the committee forwarded it with the bracketed language.
So Sean, your option one is go back to the.
just keep policy
the
as is.
Current policy as is and don't make change.
Cause we're not out of like compliance by like keeping it as is.
No,
Which is,
we're
that
not.
was just like an optional thing maybe.
So that gives us, to kind of frame Sean's options, I think the one that would be really uncomfortable would be to bring this forward to a work session or to a business meeting, pull it off the consent and have the same conversation all over again. And so I think what I'm kind of looking for the board is, do we want to let this simmer? Table it to a whole nother work session where we can have this conversation with more information or more time to think about it? Or, I mean, any of those options are up to you. I'm here to facilitate that, but I think the one that lands the poorest is going to a business meeting with a split board and we just start hashing this out all over again. So, yeah, I'm kind of, Sean laid those out really well. Do we want existing policy as is? Like, where kind of are you landing? And then maybe we can have sort of a consensus idea of what we'll do with it.
Well, I think that, I appreciate what Sean said about like not showing the public that we're not, taxing our budget more. However, some of us spend a lot of time, outside of these meetings, working and doing things with other agencies and other organizations to bring things to the school. We go to conferences, we spend more, all of our time is not spent equally. Some person might spend 8 hours a week and some person might spend 30 hours a week. So I think that needs to be taken into consideration, how much time people are actually spending in this role. So, yeah, I think that we should have some kind of consensus before I think we should talk about it in a session meeting.
But also what you're saying is like that could be reimbursements. You don't have to take a statement and.
It's not reimbursement if it's just your time.
Right, but like I'm saying, like any added, like if you go to a conference, that's a reimbursement, like.
My time is not reimbursable going to a conference. All that's reimbursable is the cost of the conference.
Sure.
And that's not actually reimbursable. The district pays that straight up. I don't have to pay it and then get money back for it. I get money for mileage, but that's it. Not for the time spent doing other things for the benefit of the district and.
And what I was referencing really, Renee, is like lobbying for like what I've done, like went and asked Portland Opera to come here or worked with World Arts Foundation to come here. I don't just come to the board meetings and that's all I do. I'm doing out in the community trying to make connections and to bring into the school district to make it better, to enhance things. So that kind of stuff is not reimbursed. And I just think that people need to consider, like, some person might be 8 hours a week and some person might be 30 hours a week, so.
But just to be clear, this stipend is one. It's not like an hourly.
Yeah, I'm
It's just like.
just saying that some people work more at this wonderful position than others. Some people give more time. And I'm trying to be real careful with my words, so,
So Blake, would you like to, could we bring this back then to a work session and perhaps have time to have the conversation a little bit more,
Yeah,
rather than.
before 9
at
o'clock.
The work session.
Yeah, so let's push this to another one. Thanks.
So we will do that. The next policy up was the naming of new facilities, and Sarah, I'm wondering if we had a bit of a misstep here. I thought the language that Tracy had created last spring was gonna be brought forward here today, and I didn't see that. Did I miss on that?
No, I think you're correct. I think that it didn't get forwarded.
Okay. Then we will bring this, because you need to see it. Tracy did a lot of work on some language that the committee reviewed, and it's pretty clear language. The board will need to weigh in. We will bring this back to another work session to make sure you can see the naming of facilities. Instructional materials, sorry, pardon me.
Did that also include, naming of spaces within facilities?
It was all within this.
Yeah, that was the.
Yeah, it was. And so we will get it to you all, and it is really
It was.
clear language that I think meets what you all wanted to meet in the past, so. The instructional materials, we did spend a good amount of time on. The language is pretty clear. A lot of the time that we spent was more related to, if you go to page 2 and 3, we wanted to make sure that, that there's a sentence in there, all requests for reconsideration of core instructional materials may be considered under administrative regulation. So, and that administrative regulation that is referenced is really about appeals processes for parents, opt-out processes for parents. And we wanted to make sure that that was clear in those paragraphs. The policy committee didn't add, they supported having that in every one of those. Otherwise, it really is kind of a cleanup of other language, and things are not, it's not a substantive change.
And so this is one of those complicated ones.
Yes.
And so just to kind of give a little bit of a history behind it, right?
Mhm.
So we had our old policy.
We did.
We
Oh,
had-
yeah, oh, yeah.
We had a policy that we updated and we approved,
Thank
which
you.
is. And then we gave it to OSBA and OSBA failed to upload it. So then we got this policy back, and really what you see here is pretty much the policy that we adopted, even though it's green.
Thank you.
The changes that we have had since then is, you see, was it the second paragraph, third paragraph? There's some of these IEs. We just mark those out because those will change. They have changed historically over time, the identification of those IEs. So we're just pointing back to policy. That is kind of the big difference between
It is.
the policy that we had approved and sent it to OSBA. In this one, it was,
All the ARs get updated on the website? Because that was the other big change last time, was it added, like, one AR turned into 6, so that's the other thing to check.
Yeah, and we need to get to that next. That's going to be a cabinet discussion. You're correct, and I forgot about that detail. We've already adopted the policy once, it was never uploaded, and then they gave us another revision. So it is substantively the same. You get to vote, or we could decide to forward it, so you can vote on it and consent agenda to approve it again. But it's, to me, and from the policy committee's perspective, it's pretty solid.
Because it includes in that first paragraph, the sentence that was added, that it was inclusive of populations represented in global
Yes.
society, which took care of all of the IE.
Yeah.
and maybe that was the change between what we had uploaded and.
Might have been.
Because the difference between what we had approved last time and what OSBA said we needed was very small.
And in full transparency, even in policy committee, I was losing track
Yes.
of what
Because
we
we
were
had
talking
three
about,
things.
because we had 3 different policies we were looking at. We finally just put 2 aside and went to work on one. Mhm.
Well, and I think the other part that was in this one was, the better definition of school library materials, which have a different reconsideration complaint versus a classroom
Library material, yes, and that distinction was important, agreed. Questions or thoughts? Would this group want us to move forward to the consent agenda? Or to the business meeting? Sure. Okay. We'll do that, then. Corporal punishment again is a cleanup of language. They added that a parent or legal guardian or minor child may use. This brought up a lot of discussion for us. That, I mean, there's some things parents can do that we can't do, is really what that paragraph says. And where does that cross over? It does clearly delineate this is what a parent can do, and it's not considered child abuse or corporal punishment. So you might want to pay attention to that last paragraph. Otherwise, it just talks about ORSs that guide us in restraint, seclusion, and corporal punishment. So here. Sorry.
If there's ever been a policy that I really want the ORS list to be brought out, it's probably this one, but yeah. Yeah.
From my professional perspective, the grade of the additions are right on point. They reference the law. It's how we train our staff. It's nothing new. The language at the bottom was definitely had some conversations when I grew up.
Yeah, because what is reasonable physical force, that could be different for so many people.
It would be. So what I would advise the staff to do, and will advise the staff to do, is if you think it's cross the line, it's cross the line. You make the call. That's your obligation under the law. No gray area for them. So that's how I will train them, because reasonable, I gone down to that too. What is reasonable for you or me, could be different.
How do we feel about moving this one forward?
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Directory information also generated a lot of conversation. We went through 2 policy groups on this one because we couldn't understand why they were striking things, especially related to sports. We always put out the grade level of an athlete, the name, and in some places like wrestling, the weight, those things. And this directory information striking kind of took away our ability to do that. So we wanted to know why. I inquired with Spencer and OSBA, and this was more immigration enforcement related, these changes, out of concern. So that's what they sent back down to us. So we had more discussion, and we have forwarded what we think is appropriate for board policy to include to you all. So we've not added in, we agree with student's name, photograph is fine, major field of study as well. Weight and height of members of the teams is still gonna stay in there. The dates of attendance, we added back in, and the degrees and awards, received, we added back in.
And I will say, I was in favor of bringing this forward to have the discussion, again, not necessarily that I was in favor of all the striking or stuff like that. So my concern, which Spencer at OSBA also had, is that are we putting ourselves in legal jeopardy because we have a whole bunch of awards? Hey, we have this junior that whatever, and so he had the same concerns, and then the fact that it is for a point in time, this whole thing will go away over time as far as the ice thing. And so are we overcorrecting and putting ourselves in legal jeopardy for a single point in time, which is a legitimate concern. I'm not denying the concern. And so I still continue to have the concern.
Because we're violating our own policy.
Because we're violating our own policy. And so, you know,
like when we celebrate like students like on like Instagram and Facebook.
Exactly.
Like the grade level piece specifically, like always like when the first conference, like junior, like, you know, like that kind of stuff, or first team.
And so I've had a lot of time to think, and like I said, I'm full of opinions. You know, some people like him, some people don't, and nobody ever likes all of them. But, I mean, I don't see a reasonable reason that we need to give out a student's address. No. You know, like in a celebration. I don't see a reasonable reason. Well, as I'm talking about the student's telephone, we do have recruiters come can I get a hold of, but maybe that's working through the coach.
And you can still, recruiters, down in the paragraph it explains, we can still give that.
College recruiters.
College recruiters, I do believe that's still listed too, along with the military.
Yeah,
Uh,
Institute of Higher
Yeah.
Education.
Yep.
Military.
Okay, so perfect, so that delay, that, you know, I don't have that concern anymore. Date of birth. I mean, do we really, no, but the one thing that I would be like, hey, can we unstrike? Is the grade level.
Yeah.
Cause I wanna be able to celebrate and recognize that junior kid that got a drama award from the state, you know. And have them recognized, and so, and then the one question I did have is most recent school attended. That is not their current school, that's like, hey, they came from Bend and got. 4-star athlete of the year or something like that, and we don't necessarily need to do that, but. So my suggestion,
If somebody were to, for like the date of birth thing, like I know there's lots of celebrations that go out on
ooh,
socials, right? Like, so when you say, happy birthday to so-and-so who's on this team, does that count as like going against this policy?
it has a potential to violate. the
ooh,
policy,
so maybe
yes.
strike that one
If that
too.
information came from the coach.
If that
Like,
came from the coach,
If
yes.
it like, or like, is there a possibility that it like how do you change that a little bit where it's like, they can create these celebrations, but it's, you're not identifying, like you are identifying their birthday, but like, I don't know, it's different, right? I don't know
I
if
would
that
think
makes sense.
like if a booster club, for example, solicited that information directly from the student athlete and family. Then I would think that they could on their own post that. Because I would have gotten their permissions, but I wonder if
But it would be on behalf of the school, like, does that?
not on a school account, I think I think they're almost an AR brewing here. The other on public notice I would just say it's not just higher. You know, we've had Olympic athletes, and we've had drafted athletes.
Yes.
Into professional sports who would have not been exempted. Because it would have been an agent or a professionals. Team or a national level coach, you know, that wouldn't be exempted. So do you know what I'm saying? Like, so yeah.
Sorry, I lost you on that one.
So, we've had kids
Right,
go pro right out of high
Right,
school, so
right.
it's not a higher institution. You have those organizations requesting information, tapes, other things. And
So
we
we
want to
would
be able to
furnish
give
that number to the New York Yankees area scout.
okay, but we can give participation in officially recognized activities in sports. Number 7.
No, but it's specifically information struck out. So like.
That
you
is
get a cell phone number.
and the date of birth,
all
but the
this.
student can give it.
Student could give it.
Yeah, they can still.
Yes, my understanding is a lot of times those work through coaches as well, so.
They do, it goes both ways, and you could get parent permission. Parent permission could take care of all of this, so if you have those circumstances, hey, mom, dad, Yankees are calling, can I give out this information, please let me know in writing. Or know that they're calling, I'm gonna send them your way, you give them the information, so there are ways around that.
And is this something that's happening, I mean, the Yankees calling versus, I mean, are there a lot of phone calls that are happening?
When it comes to NCAA in particular, not from the pros, no, but when it comes to higher institutions, yes, it's a lot.
Okay, yeah.
The, parents have that opportunity every August to review permissions on what we can and can't release as well. This is really about sports. This is about those big things where we talk about kids, we recognize kids for their accomplishments and limiting that amount of information to be able to share.
And media guides,
Mhm.
we're violating this a lot.
We are.
I don't know if we'll get to resolution. Do we want to talk about this one? And
I'm so far away.
Mhm.
Question,
Mhm.
if you look at policy that comes right after this, JOB, not in the board packet, literally in the board policy.
Mhm.
JOB personally identifiable information, which is what this is not,
Right.
right? There is prior consent to release. There are rules within here that if you as a parent were comfortable with the school giving information to a recruiter, you could give prior consent as a parent.
Okay.
Michael and I are kind of having the same thought, that we both worry more about identity theft.
Yeah.
than the things we're talking about and hacking into kids' bank accounts because they use their birthday as a password. I mean, you know, and that happens, unfortunately. Making IDs with a kid's photo and name. I mean, that stuff is where I get a little bit more weird about it and protecting them. But when you look at JOB, it does give some permission so that a parent can say, I'm okay with you having some of this information that may not be considered directory information.
Well, 9:30 PM idea. What if we ask the policy review committee to take on JOB? And then represent this to the board with JOA and JOB
Oh, we could,
together?
Okay.
Yeah.
That way maybe we could have more context to the conversation. Does that work?
Okay.
if I reflect on that in the morning when I had some space.
Yeah. I'm basically
Great
going to the idea. Okay,
All right,
policies.
policies are finished. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. This one I would love to skip. Can we skip this one, David?
I really wish we could. I'll be honest with you.
So, David, has been quite a trooper over the last few months, between Arizona and here and logging on remotely, to make this work, but, he informed us in a letter that, which is attached, that, just to take care of himself and his family, he needs to resign from his position. And so we have a motion on the table to accept, well, we don't have it on the table, but I imagine we will. Anyway, so we received a letter from him announcing his resignation from position 7, effective tonight. Pursuant to policy DBC, the board must officially accept the resignation in order for it to become effective and announce the vacancy. BBD policy provides that the board will fill the vacancy through board appointment. It states that the appointee will serve until June 30th following the next election, at which time the individual elected in May of that year will fill the remaining portion of an expired term or serve a full 4-year term, or serve until June 30th of the subsequent election year if the vacancy occurs after the filing date in an election year. This is not an election year, so that part doesn't pertain. What would happen is we would, should we accept this, we would post the position, and then it would apply. Then we would formalize a process about how we interview, rank, and ultimately select David's successor. So with that, how about this? I'll entertain a motion, then we can have discussion.
As much as I don't want to make this motion, David, I will move to accept Director David Liggins' letter of resignation from position 7 at large of the Gresham-Barlow School District Board of Directors, effective November 20th, 2025, and declare the position vacant.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Sean, second by Chris, to accept the letter of resignation. Discussion.
I'd like to say some stuff.
Go for it.
This has not come lightly. This has been one of the biggest opportunities to give back to this community that I've ever had. And I have absolutely loved every second of it. Spending time with this board, with the staff, with everyone, the teachers, the community, the children. This is not a decision that comes lightly whatsoever. I would like to read my resignation letter. I'm writing to you today to tender my resignation due to some family issues that I need to devote my entire time to. I have appreciated working with everybody on the board as well as everyone at the district office and the schools. My running for school board was a way of me giving back to a community that has lifted my family up and appreciated us so much. My perception of what a school board director does is nothing what the real job is. That is nothing but the truth. My favorite part of the job was graduations, to see the kids that worked so hard for 12 years being able to go across that stage with such joy and happiness. Also visiting the schools and being able to spend time with the principals, the staff, the teachers, and the students. Whether it be High Five Fridays, playing hockey in the gym with the students, or dismissal with Mr. Milliken, these were the highlights. Mr. Cook, I want you to know you are well respected by your peers and staff. You, sir, are a fine gentleman who is doing an amazing job. Superintendent Klinger, you are both an asset to this district and community. You are the perfect person for this position, and you are doing amazing. Sarah Avery, I can't say anything more than you are amazing. Staff, your commitment to ensuring that every child gets the best education is bar none. Your tireless efforts do not go unnoticed. Irma, I will miss your smile, but be aware I was told not to be a stranger. To my fellow board members, you are each individual and bring a piece of you and your community to the table, and this is what makes us who we are. Please continue to work together cohesively. Even though each of us has a different perspective, we were always able to take the content and create the best policy we could offer. To this community, 95% of you have been awesome, and you are able to bring your issues to the board in a professional manner so we can help navigate them. To the other 5% that come in and yell and scream, please know that the members of this board are not paid, and the only thing they want to do is ensure our students are getting the best education. Lastly, if you could please do one thing for me, name the basketball floor after Coach Tom Johnson. This man has earned it. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
I know it's late, but could I say something?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, David, thank you for your service. I think you probably had a different idea about what school board members did when you first got on the board. And your enthusiasm for learning, your excitement about High Five Fridays, your coming to talk back to the board about what you saw and what you observed, and the pleasure that you took in being able to go visit the schools was contagious. We'll go with that. You made me see my board service in a little bit different light, and I appreciate that, and I thank you for your service. It was not very long, but it was long enough to leave a difference for this board, and I thank you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And I just want to add, David, you were the first school board director of Gresham-Barlow that I spoke with, and you made me feel very warm and welcome. And you made me more excited about running. And you're a very special person. I love your management style and the way you conduct your business and the way you care for your employees. And you're a great human being. You're a great person, and I'm really gonna miss you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna miss it.
I was gonna say, are we gonna vote?
Oh, we will. David, I also want to acknowledge that the spirit of gratitude that you bring to this work and purpose came at a deep sacrifice in your own life through a wealth of experiences that most people probably wouldn't even know. And that resilience and tenacity to channel that not into victimhood, but into being a champion for everybody is in way too short a supply. And so I just want to thank you not only for the service that you brought to this board, but I know you brought it to this community. I know that you love this community deeply and you love your family deeply. And well done. You didn't leave anything on the table. You sprinted to the finish. And so thank you for the way that you served.
Thank you, sir.
And David, I try not to get emotional. You and I are friends outside of this, but we were running mates together. We worked hours together. And it's been great to get to know you. I didn't know you before respective campaigns. And the one weight of my heart is my son. And you took Spence underneath your wing, and inviting him to do lots of things and get interested in some hobbies that we share. When he used to live at your older house, he would drive by it and he'd see you out and stop by, and you would always, be very kind to him. And I really appreciate that. And I could see how you treated Spencer is how you see every student in this district, and you care for each one. So thank you.
Thank you. You got a special kid there, bud.
So that.
You guys make me cry.
Good. So it's our party. Besides this, we have to let you off the hook. So we've got a motion on the. So there's no other discussion. All those in favor, even reluctantly.
Can I say nay?
Yeah, you can. All right. David, I don't even know that you vote.
No.
I don't think I do.
It carries even with your abstention. So, all right. Thank you, David.
Thank you guys. I'm gonna miss all of you. I really am, but I'll keep in touch. I'll keep in touch.
I look forward to that.
David made the commitment that last time I saw him, that he was not going to be a stranger, that he can still show up and we'll still go look at some schools. And so he'll be around.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that'll. I guess, are we accepting it now, or does David get to vote and all the rest of the meeting?
I would think that it could be end of
Okay.
day.
David, a great legal risk. David, that's what it. Our next is a budget committee appointments. And you want to do this, or do you want me to just kind of summarize what I know? Okay, so we talked about that process at the last meeting. We had two district staff reached out to both of those individuals. One of them is willing to serve, so we'll follow the policy, the procedure that we laid out at our last meeting. We'll follow that for the appointment of Aaron Meacham's previous role. But Garrett Wood has, and he was here tonight, has expressed a willingness to continue to serve. And so we have a recommended move.
He was the one on the very end.
He was the one right before me, yeah.
Okay.
So with that, there's a recommended motion here for that position specifically.
I would move to accept to reappoint Garrett Wood to position 7 on the Gresham-Barlow School District Budget Committee.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Chris, seconded by Sean. To reappoint Garrett Wood to position 7 on the budget committee. Any discussion?
Do I vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Again, enormous risk to yourself. Okay, with that, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Okay. You'll notify Garrett, or is that? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I let him know that we were gonna appoint him today anyway, so I was just gonna stay.
What a gamble. Okay, so we will follow the procedure for soliciting applications for the other position, and we'll try to get that filled quickly. So okay, next up is personnel report, employee contracts. Michael.
Just have a few people, for your approval to hire, so we can pay them this month. Or. Yeah, these are all replacement. You will be having some coming up, we do have some retirements this year, so they will be temporaries, but.
Okay, there's a recommended motion.
I'll move to approve the recommended license new hires list for 2025-26.
Second.
Okay, moved by Brenna, seconded by Heather. I don't play favorites even on. Okay, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, passes. Next up, we've got discussion items with board travel. We had this before, and I'm happy to bring this forward in the future. I think this might be time sensitive due to NSBA. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay. So we had asked about attendance in national board conferences, and asked district staff to provide some cost estimates for the upcoming conferences, and specifically it's NSBA, and so that's attached. Everybody's had a chance to look at that. Again, this is just for discussion. And I'm not necessarily looking for any kind of resolution.
Is the resolution, sorry,
No, go ahead, Sean.
um. Are we discussing whether we should or shouldn't or will or won't do that NSBA this year? Is that kind
I
of?
think that's part of
where
it.
we're
I wanted to get the information, particularly in light of the budget constraints, to get the information in front of the board to have discussion about the value of NSBA and, yeah, merits of attending this year, particularly, or I kind of get a gauge of how the board wants to proceed with board travel.
I have a quick comment.
Yeah.
I feel like if we just had a long conversation about budget, I'm not in favor of doing this. I do think that there is value in reviewing each year the opportunity to attend a variety of conferences. I also would like to continue to put in a strong plug that we have a very good conference that's here locally, and would like to see more board members be able to participate in at least some portion of those conferences as well. But for this year, I would be against going to a national conference.
And I personally, I attend the NSBA meetings. I like the fact that we do it like an every other year thing, that we were spreading out the costs, and so maybe because next year too is fiscally like uncertain, maybe we just skip this cycle in 2 years and pick it up again. It would be 2 years from this year, whenever that is, 28. At 28. But I mean, once again, I'm an idea person, but I do agree, there's good local conferences. I'm plugging again, the school law conference is a very good conference for board members to go to, especially on the 1 day. It's a 3 day conference, but the main big long days on next Thursday. Down in Eugene is good information. It helps, there's some potential board topics, but it also helps educate yourself around the areas of law, such as special education, hot topics that are coming up legally that we may be facing, or legislative things that happened in the past that affect us, or things that may be happening in the future. It's a very good, solid conference for you to go to. We moved our board meeting date, so our admin can go, and I am going as well. If you're able to make it, this is what probably more bang for the buck than you're gonna get from NSBA for $3,000. So that's my plug.
That's about 50. Okay. It's discussion. We don't need motion, but, okay. Any other thoughts before we close this item?
I do wonder, do we need to have some sort of, it doesn't have to be a voting decision, but an understanding. That way, Sarah's not hit up by a board member, hey, I want to go to NSBA this year, if we're. Have an understanding that we're not doing it this year. It's a, is there that understanding?
Do we have something in writing? Because like, this is something wrong.
It's been past practice that we've done it approximately every other year.
It's past practice,
And
not
It's tradition.
Okay.
So,
but we haven't been consistent on it.
yeah.
And what I would say is we would not take action on something that we're not going to do. So I get that it was like, we wouldn't make a motion saying like, we're not gonna go to NSBA this year, because it's not something that we're.
Well, yeah, I wasn't necessarily thinking.
You're
of
capturing
like
the conversation in the minutes, right? Yeah, if the minutes.
If we were going to go, we'd have a motion saying that we would allow someone to go who was interested. We're not gonna have that motion, therefore there is.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know that we even have a
Okay.
motion.
I don't know that we have,
We
but I
haven't
think that
discussed.
might be a good practice of just to keep it front and center. If a board member's going, then we're gonna move to approve this board member to go. That might be a good practice, and I wonder if that's a policy, like a board travel. Or like policy or something that we might want to entertain. That's for future, that's not for.
Any conferences or whatever
Yeah.
that board members were reimbursed for, it's a motion.
Managing our own budget. Yeah. Which, well.
We have a budget.
There's a budget item in now everybody's gonna look at it. Okay. All right, future board agenda topics, we're working through that list and trying to populate the agendas with it. I think you can vouch for, we've had some very long meetings with some critical stuff but we are working on getting information in.
Just add to that real quick. So in the agenda item, there are 5 bullet points at the bottom.
Mhm.
So we've worked
Clear those
through,
up.
yeah, we've worked through the list and, I'm not speaking well. We went through the list that we brainstormed at the retreat and have identified where those fall already and what we already do. These 5 topics were a little ambiguous for us to know exactly what the ask was. And so what we'd like to ask, is that if one of those 5 topics was your topic, will you submit the regular board request and add more detail? So then we can kind of go through our process and know, what it is, what the need is we're trying to meet. So we don't give you a presentation, you're like, that's not even what we wanted. So we can be more clear. That makes sense?
Yeah. I know one of those is mine for sure, so I will do that. Okay, announcements. We've got our special board work session coming up back at Public Safety and Schools Building on December 11th, followed by a regular board business meeting. I want to alert the board that I'm working on something of a formal invite on my end to the winter conference at San Barlow High School, which is a joint band and choir concert. That would be on December 17th. Just to try to push that on your calendars. If that's something that the board as a whole has interest in, then we want to kind of have some public notifications that this isn't a meeting, this is just an event.
It's another
So,
forum notice.
so maybe we'll, as we get closer, but, because I don't think I didn't, that's springing it on you, isn't it? That wasn't springing that on you. Okay,
No, we forgot, it's on.
okay, so just,
Why does it have to be a problem?
I just would like food. And
yeah, well, because we keep looking for.
No, Alice in Wonderland is amazing at Gresham High School and you guys
Uh-huh.
should all go watch it. So, and the last weekend is this weekend. It's real good.
Unfortunately, I usually Wednesdays I'm home, which is
There's
why
people's like there.
well, that's one reason to travel. So I'll be out.
Just as a preview, the reason why I think it's kind of a cool event is it's an alumni, they do an alumni band, an alumni choir, so you get to see generations perform and they do a good job with
Are you
it.
one of the performers?
No, I wasn't in any of the music program, which if I sang even now, you would know. Okay. With that, there being no other business for the board, we're adjourned.
Just before.
Thank you for being here, David.
We had some.
Bye, David.
Thank you, guys. Love you guys.
Yeah. See ya. Thank you, David. Don't be a stranger.